the next clock.
Bank at 15th and Pennsylvania, an old red brick building, very handsome. And anyone as old as that clock is will likely be rather slow.
Deserves to be off just a bit. The point I wanted to make is the Constitution says the clock, not any of this pomp or ceremony, or even the oaths, actually signal the transfer of power. Senator Biden from the House Judiciary Committee. By the way, I made a mistake earlier. It was not Willie Brown from California. It was Congressman John Lewis of Georgia, to whom I apologize, who was there up on the Hill. At any rate, the point to make is it's the clock. The 20th Amendment to the Constitution specifies that the terms of the President and the Vice President end at noon on the 20th day of January, and the terms of their successor begin. If you're into presidential inaugural trivia, as we are, Mr. Bush took the office 3 minutes after noon.
Well, the trivia is that the presidency must change, and no kind of event, human failure, delays, oversleeping, or anything like that can be allowed to delay it, because it would be trouble. Who was president when that happened? And, so it's noon, period.
Henry Graff, join us for just a second while we're listening and watching the Marine Band. How has this inaugural ceremony changed over the years, besides becoming grander?
It hasn't changed very much. It was once a private affair, and it was not attended by the great multitude. But the first outdoor inauguration was Madison's. It was held at the Capitol, formerly...
Virginia Kelly, Governor Clinton's mother. Henry, I'll interrupt you occasionally.
Yes, sure.
I apologize, just to identify people. Please go on.
Sure. The event became larger and larger, and now, of course, it's of world proportions. The first broadcast of an inauguration was Coolidge's in 1925. The first televised inauguration was Harry Truman's in 1949. And the public feels, I think, a greater sense of participation in the last generation than ever before. It was once a simple thing. We're talking before about the transition. Millard Fillmore, when Franklin Pierce arrived, took him to hear William Makepeace Thackeray, who was lecturing in the city of Washington. I can't imagine a president today coming in on such soft feet.
And Alan Brinkley, it reminds me, watching that motorcade go up, that Jefferson sort of wandered over to his inauguration, didn't he?
Well, Jefferson, who'd been living in Washington as vice president, walked to his inauguration from his boarding house on Capitol Hill, took the oath of office, and walked back and had lunch. And in fact, didn't move into the White House, I think, for 2 weeks.
We said a little earlier that the White House is being transformed at the moment. As we watch this is the official party, of course, Mrs. Gore, Mrs. Quayle, and various aides and members of the family, and I apologize, we simply do not recognize them all as yet. But as they go down, and they go from the east side of the Capitol over to the west terrace here, which we said has only been used since Ronald Reagan and George Bush. Jim Wooten, Jim, tell us what is actually going on down at the White House at the moment.
Well, Peter, what they've done is to change the chairs, actually, in the reviewing stand. That's about the only thing that's going on here. We can't tell you what's going on inside the White House, other than we assume that a lot of mementos are being moved in for Clinton, since all of President Bush's have already been moved out. I was quite curious about what actually goes on between a president-elect and the retiring president, and I was doing a little bit of reading. When Eisenhower welcomed Kennedy, whom, by the way, he admired and in whom he was very interested, he took him into the Oval Office and showed him around and sat him down behind the desk. This was in the period before the inauguration, and showed him some buttons on the underside of the desk. And Kennedy said, "Well, what's this one, Mr. President?" And he said, "I'll show you." So he pushed the button, and 5 minutes later, a helicopter landed on the South Lawn, ready to take him anywhere he wanted to go.
I don't know if you can see a monitor there, but there was the most delightful look on Chelsea Clinton's face a moment ago. She looked back to one of the Gore children as she took the arm of her naval aviator escort there, as if to say, this ain't half bad. The Clintons have gone out of their way to try to give this child, who's never lived, I think, anywhere, David, except in the governor's mansion in Little Rock, a normal life. She is, in my own experience, which is astonishingly limited, a charming, normal child. Caused some controversy here in Washington when they chose to send her to a private school rather than a public school.
Well, I would guess that half of the people on that platform, at least those young enough to have children, have sent them to private schools. So there's a good deal of hypocrisy here going on.
Well, some of the criticism of Governor Clinton, soon-to-be President Clinton, has been because of his, let's listen.
Heraldic trumpets.
Ladies and gentlemen, Marilyn Quayle, accompanied by Tipper Gore.
Music is an essential part of this celebration. As we said, virtually all of it has been provided by the United States Marine Band, called the President's Own ever since Thomas Jefferson.
It is the oldest musical organization in the U.S. It plays any kind of music you want, from rock and roll to jazz to classical to pop to whatever. They're very, very good.
I was just trying to figure out whether or not those trumpeters were also Marines or not, and I couldn't. There is the inaugural outfit of Mrs. Clinton's that we referred to a little earlier, done by a designer in Little Rock, who, if history is a guide, has become vastly more famous than she was before by providing clothes to the about-to-be First Lady. It is fair to say that Mrs. Clinton does not appear to have a passion for clothes, or a passion for design, or a passion even to be fashionable. It is often pointed out that she bought her wedding dress at a department store in Fayetteville, Arkansas on the night before her wedding, and that is seen to have pretty much illustrated her thinking about the importance of clothes ever since. I'm sure that will change. It is Mrs. Clinton carrying the Bible. When Governor Clinton puts his hand
Ladies
on the
and
Bible
gentlemen, Barbara Bush, accompanied by Hillary Rodham Clinton.
And gets sworn in, the copy of the book will be held by his wife.
Well, it's a long way from Little Rock.
But the moving truck has arrived, David, even though it is a long way from Little Rock. The moving truck, which left Little Rock a couple of days ago, has now arrived at the White House. And as the Bushes and the Clintons have gone up, it has arrived to unload the Clintons' goods. Back on the West Terrace, the Vice President, grinning, exchanging grins with Senator Mitchell and Congressman Gephardt. Gephardt to the left, Senator Mitchell.
Accompanied by Vice President Quayle.
The doorkeeper of the House, David.
Shows an appointment for his lung power.
Well, there's the There's the moving van. I don't mean to make light of this great moment on the west side of the Capitol. They can't get the moving van through the White House gate. But we can promise you they will in the next several hours.
It's a big black iron gate. I don't think that...
But it does say, doesn't it, David, again, just how instant this transfer of power is, and as you said a moment ago, how tough it is for the outgoing president.
That's correct.
There, by the way, is a man to whom we are grateful. That's the clerk of the House down there, Don Anderson, and in that crowd as well, who has been terribly helpful to all of us in our appreciation of this enormous, great establishment. And I'd like to thank him publicly for all the kindness he extended to us, the clerk of the House, including showing us the other day the journal of the first House of Representatives, which he keeps in his office and thumbs through on occasion. We have, by the way, we will not spoil it either for you or for us, but the president's inaugural speech has been released to the press. It is the centerpiece, of course, of this inauguration ceremony. And we'll tell you this much because there's been a lot of talk about it heretofore. It's not very long by presidential speech standards. 1,500 words. We'll see how long it takes this quite occasionally verbose man to deliver it.
Some presidents have come to be so sick and tired of hearing "Hail to the Chief," they've ordered it stopped.
Hail to the Chief. And so begins the inauguration ceremony.
Mr. President, Mr. Vice President,
Senator Ford of Kentucky.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chief Justice, former President and Mrs. Carter, President-elect Clinton and Vice President-elect Gore, my colleagues and guests, welcome to the 1993 presidential inauguration. Today, our nation bids a gracious goodbye to an outgoing administration and warmly welcomes in a new one as William Jefferson Clinton takes office as the 42nd President of the United States. This peaceful and orderly transfer of power that we will soon witness is a remarkable tribute to the genius of the Constitution and the enduring strength of our political system and our proud national heritage. Indeed, the eyes of the nation and the world are on us now as we prepare to inaugurate William Jefferson Clinton as President and Albert Gore Jr. as Vice President of these United States. So President Bush, President-elect Clinton, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as he has been called upon before, we now ask the Reverend Billy Graham to lead our nation in prayer. Reverend Graham.
Reverend Graham, who's had an astonishing long association with American presidents. He's 74 now.
Shall we pray? Our God and our Father, we thank you for this historic occasion when we inaugurate our new president and vice president. We thank you for the moral and spiritual foundations which our forefathers gave us and which are rooted deeply in Holy Scripture. Those principles have nourished and guided us as a nation in the past. But we cannot say that we're a righteous people, for we are not. We've sinned against you. We've sown to the wind and are now reaping the whirlwind of crime, drug abuse, racism, immorality, and social injustice. We need to repent of our sins and turn by faith to you. And now on this 20th day of January, 1993, we commit to you President-elect Clinton and Vice President-elect Gore, whom you have permitted to take leadership at this critical time in our nation's history. Help them always to see the office to which they've been elected as a sacred trust from you. We pray that you will bless their wives, who will share so much of the responsibility and burdens. May President-elect Clinton know that he is never really alone, but that the eternal God can be his refuge, and he can turn to you in every circumstance. Give him the wisdom you have promised to those who ask, and the strength you alone can give. We thank you for his predecessor, President Bush, and the dedication he gave to this office. Bless him as he and Mrs. Bush continue their dedicated service to our country in other spheres. We commit this inaugural ceremony to you and ask that the memory of this event may always remind us to pray for our leaders. I pray this in the name of the one who was called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. Amen.
The voice of 1,000 public crusades, Billy Graham. He's prayed with the Clintons before. He was here for Richard Nixon's inaugural ceremony. This is the 8th inauguration he has been at. We're now going to hear from the Philander Smith College
Ladies
Choir
and
from Little Rock,
gentlemen, it's now
Arkansas.
my pleasure to present the Philander Smith Collegiate Choir from Little Rock, Arkansas. The choir, under the direction of Stephen L. Hayes, will perform City on the Hill, composed by Dr. Marvin V. Curtis.
Who's a professor of music at Virginia Union University, and this is its premiere performance. City on the Hill, Marvin Curtis, world premiere for him. How excited he is. He's a great friend of Bill Clinton and Hillary's, and he said if I could say anything, I would say that it is time for us to be a city on the hill again. And that's what he wrote.
Ladies and gentlemen, I now present Justice Byron White, who will administer the vice presidential oath of office to Albert Gore, Jr.
Byron White, who's 75, is the only remaining justice on the court appointed by a Democrat. It was going to be Thurgood Marshall, the former justice, but he is regarded as having, he is not regarded as, his ill health prevented him from coming. Justice White will administer the oath to Vice President.
He was appointed by John Kennedy, delivered the Colorado delegation to Kennedy at the 1960 convention.
I, Albert Gore, Jr., do solemnly swear
I, Albert Gore, Jr., do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
that I will well and faithfully perform
that I will well and faithfully perform
the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
And I know you will, Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
The Bible was a gift from his father, Albert Gore Sr., formerly a senator.
This is the man who would have been, had he had his dream come true, been president himself. He ran for the presidency 4 years ago, was beaten, was chosen by Bill Clinton this year. The two have become, by virtually all accounts, very close, not by any means interchangeable, but very close, with Al Gore having been a, in the main, very devoted servant of the ticket. And as we have heard said so many times, allowing hugging between men to come back into somewhat more public fashion.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have one of the world's best-known sopranos participating in today's ceremony, who will perform an American medley that includes Simple Gifts by Aaron Copland and Make a Rainbow by Portia Nelson. From the Metropolitan Opera, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Marilyn Horne.
One of the truly great mezzo-sopranos. She lives in New York City. It's the old story. She met Clinton when she was giving a concert in Little Rock 7 years ago, and they became friends ever since. She's a terrifically cool, relaxed, laid-back woman and a great singer.
Tis the gift to be simple, tis the gift to be free, tis the gift to come down where you ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn, turn will be our delight, till by turning, turning we come round right. 'Tis the gift to be simple, 'tis the gift to be free, 'tis the gift to come down where you ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, teddy bear brown. These are the colors that children everywhere love to have around. Make a rainbow, make a rainbow. Let the colors dance and shine. Make a rainbow till that rainbow is a beautiful design of red and white and black and yellow, all so different yet the same. Rainbows will sparkle when children everywhere answer to one name. Make a rainbow, till the skies are clear above, and we know that the colors of children everywhere shine in a world of love. Red and white and black and yellow, like a rainbow high above. Let us make the colors of children everywhere shine in a world of love.
Marilyn Horne from the Metropolitan Opera and every other great stage in the world. Boy, is she glad it isn't any colder. She said the other day that when the Marines instruments freeze up, so does her throat. She and Bill Clinton share throat doctors. She's a native of Pennsylvania. She sang at a political rally for Franklin Roosevelt when she was 4 years old. Marilyn Horne. There's a brief interlude in this inaugural ceremony at the moment now. The Marine Band will play. We will go away for just a minute and be right back.
One thing about the new Eagle Vision TSI comes through loud and clear. It's a remarkably designed sports sedan.
January, he was Mr. Right. February, Mr. Wrong. March, he's back. There's only one calling plan that adjusts with you. Off again, on again, never again. It's the most from Sprint. The most saves you on whomever you call the most each month. Even when it changes, it's automatic. Could be the easiest part of your relationship.
With steadfast stares, the people cry, brave future, new world, time that goes by, the touch, the feel.
Take a close look at these two spaghetti sauces, Prego on the left and Ragu Old World style on the right, and decide for yourself which one comes out on top. We think the message is getting through. Prego, homemade taste. It's in there.
Baking with Grandma and Smucker's Cherry Preserves. What a treat. Jams are naturally fat-free, under 20 calories per teaspoon. Bet you can't wait to taste these. With a name like Smucker's, it has to be good.
There it is, the mall. Those white tents are down on the middle of the mall, roughly opposite the National Museum. They were for the reunion which was held here in the mall, which began over the weekend. People from all over the country came to hear an enormous variety of entertainment, from every imaginable kind of entertainment from all across the country. They brought in scores and scores of bands and entertainers, eat every imaginable kind of food. It has been an astonishingly relaxed atmosphere around here, and the Marine Band sure helps.
They got ahead of themselves for a time, and they put some music in to fill a little time, because Clinton cannot become president until noon, whatever they do.
Yes, having been behind for much of the morning, they suddenly
he's
got
always
ahead of
behind. Now he's ahead.
Well, let's take this second then with the Marine Band in the background to go up to Carol Simpson and see how folks are enjoying it. Carol?
Peter, we're in the crush of humanity here in the cheap seats, but I do have someone that I'd like to introduce you to. He's wearing a button saying he's a Yellow Dog Democrat. It's John Gale. He's from West Columbia, Texas, and this is the 4th Democratic presidential nomination inauguration that he's seen. Mr. Gale, what do you think of this one?
It's great. Very great. I'm very proud of our new President-elect Clinton and look forward to him doing a tremendous job as president of this great nation.
And you know that Bill Clinton's hero was John F. Kennedy, and you were here for his inauguration. Any comparisons?
I think there's a tremendous comparison between these two men. When President Kennedy was sworn in, I was 35 years old, and I can look at a lot of the young people here today and think that he's ignited the spark in them like President Kennedy did in me in 1961.
Hey, Carol?
Yes,
there's a young person right behind you there.
There is a young person right behind.
How about asking him the same question?
This is a young person that got to vote for the first time in this election. What's your name and where are you from?
My name's Jennifer Lynn Franco, and I'm from Portland, Oregon.
And what are your feelings on this day?
I'm extremely excited. This was the first president I voted for, and I campaigned very hard in my local area to make sure that he got up there, and he's there, and I'm very excited.
What about your future? He talks about young people like yourselves. Are you optimistic?
With him in office, I think I'll be much more optimistic, and I hope that we'll have as good of a future as my parents had when they were growing up, and I hope things will get a lot better.
Okay, like Mr. Gale, is there a spark of enthusiasm that he's inspired in you?
Definitely, definitely.
Well, that's the story from young and old down here. Peter, back to you.
Thanks, Carol. You go ahead and deal with Mr. Gale, who you've just called old.
I have a little story that I think is worth telling. Chelsea Clinton, last year during the campaign, had a little trouble with her math. Her father was flying around the country running for president. She sent her math papers by fax to him on his airplane. He read them, saw what needed, and faxed them back to her. She passed math. I think that's what fathers are for.
Administer the presidential oath of office to William Jefferson Clinton, Chief Justice.
This is the second time that Chief Justice Rehnquist has done this. He did it for George Bush in 1989. Mrs. Clinton will hold the family Bible. It's a King James Bible given to Clinton by his grandmother when he was a child.
Are you ready to take the oath? I am. Will you please raise your right hand and repeat after me? I, William Jefferson Clinton, do solemnly swear.
I, William Jefferson Clinton, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
And will to the best of my ability.
And will to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
so a lifelong dream is realized. Not precisely certain where it began, but when he came to this great capital as a young boy and met President Kennedy, the idea of public service was certainly instilled in his mind already. And in the Kennedy relationship, it came full circle when he went to Arlington yesterday to pay tribute at the Kennedy grave. And there he stands, the man who a year ago nobody would have bet a plug nickel on making it through the bruising presidential
Ladies
campaign.
and gentlemen, the President of the United States of America, William Jefferson Clinton.
My fellow citizens, today we celebrate the mystery of American renewal. This ceremony is held in the depth of winter, but by the words we speak and the faces we show the world, we force the spring. A spring reborn in the world's oldest democracy that brings forth the vision and courage to reinvent America. When our founders boldly declared America's independence to the world and our purposes to the Almighty, they knew that America, to endure, would have to change. Not change for change's sake, but change to preserve America's ideals: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Though we march to the music of our time, our mission is timeless. Each generation of Americans must define what it means to be an American. On behalf of our nation, I salute my predecessor, President Bush, for his half-century of service to America. And I thank the millions of men and women whose steadfastness and sacrifice triumphed over depression, fascism, and communism. Today, a generation raised in the shadows of the Cold War assumes new responsibilities in a world warmed by the sunshine of freedom, but threatened still by ancient hatreds and new plagues. Raised in unrivaled prosperity, we inherit an economy that is still the world's strongest, but is weakened by business failures, stagnant wages, increasing inequality, and deep divisions among our own people. When George Washington first took the oath I have just sworn to uphold, news traveled slowly across the land by horseback and across the ocean by boat. Now the sights and sounds of this ceremony are broadcast instantaneously to billions around the world. Communications and commerce are global. Investment is mobile. Technology is almost magical. And ambition for a better life is now universal. We earn our livelihood in America today in peaceful competition with people all across the earth. Profound and powerful forces are shaking and remaking our world. And the urgent question of our time is whether we can make change our friend and not our enemy. This new world has already enriched the lives of millions of Americans who are able to compete and win in it. But when most people are working harder for less, when others cannot work at all, when the cost of health care devastates families and threatens to bankrupt our enterprises great and small, when the fear of crime robs law-abiding citizens of their freedom, and when millions of poor children cannot even imagine the lives we are calling them to lead, we have not made change our friend. We know we have to face hard truths and take strong steps, but we have not done so. Instead, we have drifted, and that drifting has eroded our resources, fractured our economy, and shaken our confidence. Though our challenges are fearsome, so are our strengths. Americans have ever been a restless, questing, hopeful people, and we must bring to our task today the vision and will of those who came before us. From our revolution, to the Civil War, to the Great Depression, to the Civil Rights Movement, our people have always mustered the determination to construct from these crises the pillars of our history. Thomas Jefferson believed that to preserve the very foundations of our nation, we would need dramatic change from time to time. Well, my fellow Americans, this is our time. Let us embrace it. Our democracy must be not only the envy of the world, but the engine of our own renewal. There is nothing wrong with America that cannot be cured by what is right with America. And so today we pledge an end to the era of deadlock and drift, and a new season of American renewal has begun. To renew America, we must be bold. We must do what no generation has had to do before. We must invest more in our own people, in their jobs, and in their future, and at the same time, cut our massive debt. And we must do so in a world in which we must compete for every opportunity. It will not be easy. It will require sacrifice. But it can be done, and done fairly. Not choosing sacrifice for its own sake, but for our own sake. We must provide for our nation the way a family provides for its children. Our founders saw themselves in the light of posterity. We can do no less. Anyone who has ever watched a child's eyes wander into sleep knows what posterity is. Posterity is the world to come, the world for whom we hold our ideals, from whom we have borrowed our planet, and to whom we bear sacred responsibility. We must do what America does best, offer more opportunity to all, and demand more responsibility from all. It is time to break the bad habit of expecting something for nothing from our government or from each other. Let us all take more responsibility, not only for ourselves and our families, but for our communities and our country. To renew America, we must revitalize our democracy. This beautiful capital, like every capital since the dawn of civilization, is often a place of intrigue and calculation. Powerful people maneuver for position and worry endlessly about who is in and who is out, who is up and who is down, forgetting those people whose toil and sweat sends us here and pays our way. Americans deserve better. And in this city today, there are people who want to do better. And so I say to all of you here, let us resolve to reform our politics so that power and privilege no longer shout down the voice of the people. Let us put aside personal advantage so that we can feel the pain and see the promise of America. Let us resolve to make our government a place for what Franklin Roosevelt called bold, persistent experimentation, a government for our tomorrows, not our yesterdays. Let us give this capital back to the people to whom it belongs. To renew America, we must meet challenges abroad as well as at home. There is no longer a clear division between what is foreign and what is domestic. The world economy, the world environment, the world AIDS crisis, the world arms race, they affect us all. Today, as an old order passes, the new world is more free but less stable. Communism's collapse has called forth old animosities and new dangers. Clearly, America must continue to lead the world we did so much to make. While America rebuilds at home, we will not shrink from the challenges nor fail to seize the opportunities of this new world. Together with our friends and allies, we will work to shape change lest it engulf us. When our vital interests are challenged or the will and conscience of the international community is defied, we will act. With peaceful diplomacy whenever possible, with force when necessary. The brave Americans serving our nation today in the Persian Gulf, in Somalia, and wherever else they stand are testament to our resolve. But our greatest strength is the power of our ideas, which are still new in many lands. Across the world, we see them embraced and we rejoice. Our hopes, our hearts, our hands are with those on every continent who are building democracy and freedom. Their cause is America's cause. The American people have summoned the change we celebrate today. You have raised your voices in an unmistakable chorus. You have cast your votes in historic numbers, and you have changed the face of Congress, the presidency, and the political process itself. Yes, you, my fellow Americans, have forced the spring. Now we must do the work the season demands. To that work I now turn with all the authority of my office. I ask the Congress to join with me. But no president, no Congress, no government can undertake this mission alone. My fellow Americans, you too must play your part in our renewal. I challenge a new generation of young Americans to a season of service, to act on your idealism by helping troubled children, keeping company with those in need, reconnecting our torn communities. There is so much to be done. Enough indeed for millions of others who are still young in spirit to give of themselves in service too. In serving, we recognize a simple but powerful truth. We need each other, and we must care for one another. Today, we do more than celebrate America. We rededicate ourselves to the very idea of America. An idea born in revolution and renewed through 2 centuries of challenge. An idea tempered by the knowledge that but for fate, we, the fortunate and the unfortunate, might have been each other. An idea ennobled by the faith that our nation can summon from its myriad diversity the deepest measure of unity. An idea infused with the conviction that America's long, heroic journey must go forever upward. And so, my fellow Americans, as we stand at the edge of the 21st century, let us begin anew with energy and hope, with faith and discipline, and let us work until our work is done. The Scripture says, and let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. From this joyful mountaintop of celebration, we hear a call to service in the valley. We have heard the trumpets. We have changed the guard. And now, each in our own way, and with God's help, we must answer the call. Thank you, and God bless you all.
We'll have a lot of time throughout today to talk about this speech and its meaning. I'm going to force my colleagues for just a moment to give me one or two-word answer, because we're going to have more of this inaugural ceremony. David Brinkley?
Effective.
Rick Hume at the White House.
George Bush turned at the end of this, looked at Mrs. Bush, and I could see his lips. That's a good speech, he said.
Jeff Greenfield.
Very self-consciously almost talking back to the John Kennedy of 30 years ago who inspired him.
Shortly after the November election, President Clinton asked noted educator, historian, and author Dr. Maya Angelou to compose a poem for this historic day. From Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and Wake Forest University, please welcome Dr. Angelou.
Maya Angelou is the first poet to take part in a swearing-in ceremony since Robert Frost in 1961. She says, "I want to speak the truth about our people, about us in this country."
Mr. President and Mrs. Clinton, Mr. Vice President and Mrs. Gore, and Americans everywhere. A rock, a river, a tree, hosts to species long since departed, marked the mastodon, the dinosaur, who left dry tokens of their sojourn here on our planet floor. Any broad alarm of their hastening doom is lost in the gloom of dust and ages. But today, the rock cries out to us, clearly, forcefully, "Come, you may stand upon my back and face your distant destiny, but seek no haven in my shadow. I will give you no hiding place down here. You, created only a little lower than the angels, have crouched too long in the bruising darkness, have lain too long face down in ignorance, your mouths spilling words armed for slaughter. The rock cries out to us today, you may stand upon me, but do not hide your face. Across the wall of the world, a river sings a beautiful song. It says, come, rest here by my side. Each of you, a bordered country, delicate and strangely made, proud, yet thrusting perpetually under siege. Your armed struggles for profit have left collars of waste upon my shore, currents of debris upon my breast. Yet today, I call you to my riverside, if you will study war no more. Come, clad in peace, and I will sing the songs the Creator gave to me when I and the tree and the rock were one. Before cynicism was a bloody sear across your brow, and when you yet knew, you still knew nothing. The river sang and sings on. There is a true yearning to respond to the singing river and the wise rock. So say the Asian, the Hispanic, the Jew, the African, the Native American, the Sioux, the Catholic, the Muslim, the French, the Greek, the Irish, the rabbi, the priest, the sheik, the gay, the straight, the preacher, the privileged, the homeless, the teacher. They all hear the speaking of the tree. They hear the first and last of every tree speak to humankind today. Come to me, here beside the river. Plant yourself beside the river. Each of you, descendant of some passed-on traveler, has been paid for. You who gave me my first name. You, Pawnee.
Or save for a free flight. Chase bonus dollars. Is your credit card this rewarding? Bonus dollars from Chase Manhattan. Profit from the experience.
The 93 Jaguar XJ6 at $549 a month. It's a dream come true.
You lend big bucks to your little darlings and they never pay you back. How to make your kids grow up and pay up on the next Oprah. Today at 4, right here on Channel 7.
Greg Hurst, Roz Abrams, Sam Champion, Eyewitness News at 5. From ABC News, this is live coverage of the inauguration of the 42nd President of the United States. Once again, David Brinkley and Peter Jennings.
It is a little after 12:30 Eastern Time here in the nation's capital. Bill Clinton is now President Clinton, as you can so plainly see. He now goes into the Capitol, David, to have an inaugural lunch. Want to expand a little bit on the speech?
Yes, I thought it was a good speech, and it was notable that the word sacrifice was used more often than you usually hear in political speeches, and it counted 3 times. He called for sacrifice, meaning, well, you know what it means. It means more taxes, it means more government interference, it means all kinds of things. And he forced people to listen to it.
Yes, I think it means a little more than just more taxes,
Oh,
too.
yeah,
In this man's case, he has been repeatedly calling on people to get more involved with their own lives,
Right.
to say that government cannot do it all for you.
The word sacrifice is difficult to get into the American political dictionary.
Well, nobody gets into it more religiously than your son, Alan Brinkley, who's one of our guest historians this morning. Alan, what did you think of the speech?
I thought it was a good speech. It was, in some ways, a speech that's very much like inaugural addresses of the past. Invitations to Americans to join with him in facing the future, evocations of the past, but it was also a very specific speech in a lot of ways. It reaffirmed a lot of the themes of his campaign. It did use the word sacrifice in a way that he's been trying to use it throughout the last year or so. And I think it's both a timeless sort of speech and also a useful barometer of what Clinton's thinking as he enters the presidency.
And the Professor Emeritus from Columbia, Henry Graft. Henry, whose other voices did you hear in there? Jeff Greenfield made the point that he heard Kennedy. I certainly heard Kennedy several times, and I thought I also heard Roosevelt.
I heard both Kennedy and Roosevelt. I think this talk is in the great tradition of these speeches. This one is a logical outgrowth of the campaign itself. It has many of the elements of the campaign. It's interesting that recent inaugural addresses, I think since Kennedy's, are written with an eye to the next edition of Bartlett's quotations. And I think there are a number of phrases in this speech which will be in that next edition. It was a good speech.
Okay, let me canvass some of my other colleagues up on Capitol Hill where I thought I heard the Congress, Cokie Roberts, take something of a shot across the bow there. Was I right from your point of view?
Well, they took something of a shot across the bow in the sense that he talked about renewing politics and reclaiming the capital for the people whose it is rather than the special interest and all of those calls to reform. And I think that to the degree that Congress identifies with special interest, that it was something of a shot across the bow. But he also praised public service. And that's a very important message to hear here. Because if you recall, we've read, even though George Bush has been in public service, and Bill Clinton did a very gracious nod to the 50 years of public service that George Bush has performed, We've had, really, with Ronald Reagan and Jimmy Carter, a sense that Washington was a bad place, a place where bad things happen. And with Ronald Reagan's first inaugural, the government was the problem, not the solution. And so to have that call to arms, to public service, I think will be heartening to the Congress in a way.
Okay, I'm not sure, quite frankly, whether presidents like it very much. I know politicians don't like it in general when we sit around doing instant analysis, but after all the work they have put into this, Britt Hume, who covers the White House for us, Britt, you know just precisely how much work he's put into this. Am I right? He read many of the speeches from the former presidents?
He did, Peter, and apparently the favorites that he had out of them all were Lincoln's second, and Wilson's first, Roosevelt's first, and of course the famed Kennedy speech, being that of the man he regarded as his inspiration. And we're also told that in this case, a departure from his usual practice, he operated off a text that he himself drafted. Normally he gets something drafted by his staff and then works on that. Now I can't tell you how much transfiguration it might have received when the team all went to work on his draft, but we are led to believe at least that these were mostly and largely his words, and certainly, Peter, they were mostly and largely his theme.
I see you standing between Senator Sarbanes of Maryland and Senator Dodd of Connecticut. Is there any buzz on the platform there?
Well, the reaction to the speech has been pretty much what you'd expect, although I was just talking to one of his Democratic colleagues, and I asked him how he felt about it, and he said, well, he thought it was a good speech. Normally at such times you hear people say it was a great speech. It was just perfect. So it was, what little I've heard, and I haven't heard a lot, was somewhat less ecstatic than one might have imagined, but it's early.
Okay, Jeff Greenfield is up there on the Hill as well. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, what I meant earlier was that this was a very self-conscious attempt to say, I am the inheritor of Kennedy. In many ways, word for word. Kennedy said, let us begin. Clinton said, let us begin anew. Kennedy said, the trumpet summons us again. Clinton said, we have heard the trumpet. With one glaring exception, which is what I think you were mentioning, Peter. He said at one point in the speech, in a very marked departure from the Kennedy-esque rhetoric, this capital, like all capitals, is a place of intrigue, where everyone worries about who's in and who's out, who's up and who's down. That's very non-traditional presidential rhetoric, and yet I have to say, instinctively, I think that's more central to what Bill Clinton believes about the culture of Washington than anything else in the speech. All Democratic presidents particularly are prisoners of the Sorensen-Goodwin-Kennedy rhetoric, that Romanesque, let us do this, let us not do A, but let's do B, our time has come. And in that one paragraph, I thought I heard the real quintessential Bill Clinton, with very modern kind of rhetoric, breaking through.
Okay, Jeff, thanks very much. We'll come back to you. We've lost sight of the president for the moment and President Bush, but I think if we take a look at the eastern side of the Capitol now, if our director will enable us to do that, we will see at least the backdrop for the next event, which is to say that Vice President Quayle and President Bush will be escorted by their opposite numbers in the new administration to the east side of the Capitol. That's Senator Alan Krantzler from California, along there beside the president, and the endless crush of Secret Service. Former Senator Alan Krantzler, you're quite right, David, to the east side of the Capitol, and will get out of town. It is, I think, David, you said earlier, it is truly a bittersweet moment, sad moment for the president. You said making them, in a sense, suffer in public.
Well, nothing is more public than a political defeat. Everyone has private defeats.
Interesting what Jeff Greenfield said, too, about the who's in and who's out, because, you know, there goes the out in many respects. The control of the Senate and the House, of course, are both now in the hands of the Democrats, as is the White House, the Democratic Party in charge of all government. That's Senator Alan Simpson of Wyoming coming down the steps with Senator Dole of Kansas. Senator Simpson, who has run the gamut from being regarded as one of the wittier men in this Capitol to one of the crueler, at least verbally, to his opponents. These men, of course, were colleagues in the Senate. Dan Quayle and Mrs. Quayle are going back to Indiana. And as we said a little earlier this morning, there's no doubt in anybody's mind that Dan Quayle doesn't believe that his political career is over by any means, though it has been very difficult for him, even with the success he had in this political campaign, to overcome the image which was in considerable measure crafted for him by late-night comedians. They give up their residence at the Naval Observatory here in Washington, which will become the residence of Vice President Gore now. Vice President Gore, as familiar with this city as any American politician, was raised here as a child. His father, as David said earlier, was a senator.
He went to school here. He's a Washingtonian.
That's Mrs. Dole, who has currently the head of the American Red Cross, saying goodbye to Dan Quayle. He was a vice president who wielded considerably more power than others before him, largely through what was called the Vice President's Competitiveness Council. And he was quite deeply resented by many legislators in this town for his ability to reverse, in many cases, legislation through the Competitiveness Council. Senator Ford from Kentucky, who was the master of ceremonies here. One personal story, I hope not at a place. He took my 10-year-old son the other day, David, when we were doing a survey trip up on the Capitol steps. He grabbed him by the shoulders and he pointed him down the mall, and he told him about the great sweep of American history that unfolded before him. I thought my 10-year-old son's eyes were going to pop out of his head. He's a man, 68 years old, regarded as one of the best horse traders in politics. Farewell from Senator Mitchell to Mrs. Bush. Jackie Judd is in the Capitol Plaza there. Jackie, your impressions?
Well, Peter, it's an impression that there is such a marked contrast of emotions here. What you're seeing on camera there is the former president, no doubt with something of a pained heart. And then alongside, behind the columns of Republicans who are here to see the president off, are the very, very joyful aides of Bill Clinton, who have toiled in the vineyards for many, many months with him. They went to one city after the other, and today they saw their man ascend to the top. So one of very, very contrasting emotions. Earlier today, Marlon Fitzwater came by and talked to us about Mr. Bush. He said he was walking the White House grounds this morning, and suddenly from about 40 feet away, a booming voice came out. It was a tourist who said, "Thank you, Mr. President. We love you. You did a great job." And Fitzwater said that made the president's day.
There will be very little, almost no ceremony at Andrews Air Force Base. Usually there's a band and a group of troops to be reviewed and all of that. 21-gun salute, so on. George Bush said he didn't want any of it. He wanted this to be Bill Clinton's day in the sun. And so very little will happen out there, except that he'll get out of the helicopter, walk to this big airplane, and fly to Houston.
George Bush, who, like his predecessor Ronald Reagan, has so enjoyed his association with the military, his visible association. I was thinking yesterday, looking at some of the great photographs that are always taken by the Washington Press Corps of him in Saudi Arabia with the troops before Desert Storm. But again, I'll defer to Britt Hume here and then to Sam Donaldson. The sense is, I have Britt and Sam first in these final days, is the heart really went out of it for George Bush, despite all of this public politeness. You agree?
Well, I think so, Peter, to some extent. But remember, in the last days, George Bush did seem to come alive with a flurry of activity. Of course, mainly on the foreign front and mainly in response to confrontations with Saddam Hussein and, of course, the humanitarian effort in Somalia. But in a way, Bush's finest hours of the last 12 months probably were the last 2 months. And in that way, you see his popularity rating has come back up to the 60 percentile range. If he'd only had that 3 months ago, he wouldn't be leaving town today.
Things would be different.
Right.
Timing is everything in politics, it is said so often. George Will, you, not to put too fine a point on it, you and George Bush were never regarded as particularly close. What are your thoughts about him as he leaves?
Well, in a way, he would have been a great 19th century president. That is, a president before we had a presidential nation where people tended to look to and key their emotions off the rhetoric of a president. He's a president who had a hard time connecting with the American people and seemed most comfortable when thinking elsewhere about foreign policy matters. In the 19th century, it was sort of viewed that the federal government was to deliver the mail, defend the shores, and not do much else. And that, perhaps a good man, wrong century.
Well, let us take that helicopter and tuck it off in a corner of your television screen here for a moment now, and let us remind you, compliments of our White House correspondent, Britt Hume, who covered Bush and will now cover Clinton, a little bit about the Bush presidency over the last 4 years. A presidency interrupted.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
From its very start, 4 years ago today, this would be the most personal of presidencies. George Bush even paused at the beginning of his inaugural address to acknowledge a couple of personal pals from his days in Congress.
Hey, Jack. Danny.
He had many pals in Congress, and it now seems clear he hoped those friendships would help him avoid the bitter battles that had raged over the budget and taxes during the previous 8 years. Bush hoped to concentrate his energies elsewhere, on the foreign policy dealings that so intrigued him. Even here, though, his approach was intensely personal. His friendship with Mikhail Gorbachev has been the subject of much comment, but it's worth remembering that at the beginning their association was marked by suspicion and personal rivalry, especially during their storm-tossed first summit at Malta, when Mr. Bush surprised and upstaged Gorbachev with a series of unexpected proposals to further Soviet reforms. Once Bush determined that it was in his interest to work with Gorbachev, he courted him ardently, a process that culminated in Gorbachev's overnight visit to Camp David during their 1990 summit in the U.S. Gorbachev, the first Soviet leader to receive such treatment, even got a chance to drive the presidential golf cart.
President Bush, how was the meeting? Just a minute, wait till I get out of this.
Before it was over, the usually stiffly formal Soviet leader was obviously having a good time, plainly charmed by the whole thing, and the Bush-Gorbachev friendship was sealed. Later, Bush would be criticized for clinging too long to Gorbachev, for waiting too long to transfer his loyalties to Boris Yeltsin. But as events of recent weeks have shown, Yeltsin, too, has been given the Bush treatment and seems as much a personal friend now as Gorbachev did then. Bush was criticized as well for going easy on his friends in the communist hierarchy in Beijing, where he once served as U.S. representative. Bush refused to cut off U.S. trade with China after the Tiananmen Square violence. He even sent his national security advisor there to hold secret meetings with and drink an infamous toast to the men who had ordered the massacre. During the Persian Gulf crisis, however, the critical moment in Bush's conduct of foreign policy, those friendships with the leaders in both Moscow and Beijing proved most useful. Both the Soviet Union and China were members of the UN Security Council, and both went along with the U.S.-backed resolutions demanding that Saddam Hussein's army get out of Kuwait and authorizing the use of force to back that up. It is not too much to say that without China and the Soviet Union, George Bush could not have gotten the legal authority to wage the Gulf War, his proudest achievement as president. At home, the president never quit trying to win over the Democratic leaders of Congress, but they proved tough adversaries, especially Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell. Mitchell almost single-handedly blocked the Bush plan to cut the tax on capital gains, and he drove a hard bargain on the budget, forcing the president to eat his celebrated promise of no new taxes. There were some legislative achievements, but it was mostly a time when the leaders of Congress refused to pass Mr. Bush's bills and he refused to sign theirs. Gridlock. When the United States economy turned down and stayed down, the one thing that might have helped the president politically was an economic growth package, but he couldn't get that from Congress either. And it is no accident that in his last acts of recent weeks have been carried out with people overseas, with leaders overseas, and not with those here on Capitol Hill. Gentlemen?
Well, Britt, I don't think in this company of players this morning anybody has been closer to the president on a more regular, on a daily basis than you have. What do you think he believes history's judgment of him will be?
My sense is that he believes history will judge him kindly because he was skillful in managing the West's victory in the Cold War, because he succeeded in evicting Saddam Hussein's army from Kuwait and rallying the international community to his side, that he believes history will see him as a man whose economic downturn, the economic downturn occurred at a bad time for him politically, that it will be rather forgiving to him on that. I don't think that he buys at all the idea that we're on the cusp of a great period of change that the public demands, and that a new generation is coming to power, and that is what drove the outcome of the election. I think he simply sees himself as a victim of circumstances and believes that history will see him as such as well.
And the Marine helicopter flies out across the Potomac to Andrews Air Force Base, passing that most majestic of needles, the Washington Monument, in a town that is enormously crowded today, with people celebrating, yes, Governor Clinton, President Clinton's inauguration as president, but also celebrating what both he and President Bush have spoken of so many times, the country means. But there is clearly something very final looking about this last trip on a Marine helicopter over to Andrews Air Force Base. We will be back in just a moment.
Wow, you folks look like experienced travelers.
Well, we are staying at a Clarion hotel.
Did you know if you paid for your room with the American Express card, you can save 30%?
Sure, for business, for pleasure.
So, happy with your room?
Yeah, they told us if they couldn't make us happy, their first night's on them.
Ooh, sounds like a good deal.
Oh, and another thing.
At Clarion, they don't throw your luggage around. Tea?
Thank you. Clarion Hotels and the American Express card. For reservations, call 1-800-4CHOICE.
Hi, may I take your order? Hello? How can I help you? Hello? Hello? Hello?
This week, history is being made. Not here, but in the kitchen. This week, Ore-Ida introduces fast fries. So crispy, so delicious, you won't believe they came from your oven and not from a fast food place. Fast fries. They're that good.
Hello?
This is one of the easiest places for a Jeep Cherokee to go. But not because of its proven capability or its legendary Jeep ruggedness. What makes it so easy to bring the classic Jeep Cherokee here is the price.
Now save an additional $500 on new 93 Jeep Cherokees.
This ABC News special coverage of Inauguration 93 continues. Once again, David Brinkley and Peter Jennings.
Well, first to encourage you to join us in about 2 hours' time from now for the parade. It's going to be terrific, the parade in Washington this afternoon. It's a great opportunity for us to have a really good time. President Clinton taking a look at the cabinet papers, which he is now signing. There's a great many specific things he must now first do.
Nobody can be in his cabinet until approved by the Congress, by the Senate, and signed by him. That's what he's doing now.
And not the entire approval process, of course, has been completed. Attorney General Zoe Baird's confirmation hearings are not completed yet. Ron Brown, the Secretary of Commerce designate. But as we watch President Clinton do this, being told precisely what to do, as so often hands the president. Look at the pens on the desk there, just beside his right hand. What treasures they will become for people. They will be framed and put in offices or studies or in the living rooms of people who are honored and fortunate enough to get a presidential pen. But as we watch this proceeding, let's just get some final comments from as I call it our company of players, beginning with you, Jim Wooten. You've been watching this from the White House, and first of all, did the moving truck get through the gate?
The moving truck is inside the White House walls now, and we assume, although it's out of sight now, we assume that the goods are now being unloaded. The thing that struck me about watching President Bush vacate the premises, as it were, was my feeling that he has come to terms with the fact that of his defeat. I talked with him a great deal in Somalia. I went with him to Somalia a couple of weeks ago, and he went on at great length about what peace he feels now about what he has done, and bears no rancor for the Americans.
I apologize.
He's stealing a pen.
So Senator Ford's the boss here to that Senator Ford of Kentucky. Just picked up one of those pens, put it right in his pocket. It'll go to a grandchild, and the others, of course, go to Congressman Michael, to Senator Mitchell. So much for the lucky common man that gets a hand on one of these pens. Senator Simpson from Wyoming. The Speaker on his right, Senator Joel Hedlund.
Well, the pens they buy, not exactly fancy ones.
I apologize. Some final thoughts for this morning, at least, from Cokie Roberts.
Hello. Final thoughts are, at least from this opening ceremony, is that you really have a Congress and a president that at the moment seem to be ready to work together. The Democrats in Congress claim, at least for these 5 minutes, that they understand that the Democratic Party is on trial now, that they really do have to be new kinds of Democrats for the people to come behind them in any significant way. And this speech did address those themes, the themes of responsibility, of duty, of sacrifice, all of the things that people want to hear from Democrats that they haven't heard in a very long time.
Very quickly from you, Jeff Greenfield, as President Bush lands at Andrews Air Force Base.
Well, Peter, when Bill Clinton told the Haitians they might be able to come to America, they went out and built hundreds of boats, which caused a great problem for him. Metaphorically, a lot of Americans built boats to come to where Bill Clinton said he wanted to leave this country. And beyond the ceremony and beyond the very glitzy parties tonight, that's the test for Bill Clinton. You know, we built some boats in this country, and are they going to get to go where he said we're going to get to go to?
When Lyndon Johnson left at the end of his term and flew to Texas in Air Force 2, I guess it was, they took his baggage off the plane, set it down on the ground, and flew away. He was infuriated because prior to that they'd had limousines and people to move his baggage and so on. They had to put his bags on the ground and left.
I think it must be one of the most difficult transitions a person can make, from being totally cared for to be, and I think that Senator Hal Heflin from Alabama there, I'm not sure, saying a quick hello. It is enormously difficult. Everything is done for you. For heaven's sake, everything's done for the White House press corps when they travel. Think what's happened for the president.
And nothing is done for him. Johnson had to carry his own bags.
Here again, you had this opportunity to see the incoming president and the outgoing president. And to remind you, as we watch here, just some of the phrases that may ring with greater resonance outside the Beltway than they do inside, when President Clinton said that a generation raised in the shadow of the Cold War assumes new responsibilities in a world which is, while warmed by the sunshine of freedom, is still threatened by ancient hatreds and new plagues. Clearly a reference to the challenges he has to meet overseas in the former Soviet Empire, which is dissolving, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in parts of Africa. He talked about profound and powerful forces shaking and remaking the world, and the urgent question for his generation, as far as he's concerned, whether they can make change a friend and not an enemy. He talked about the drift that had occurred in the society and raised the issue, which it is an issue for many Americans, of whether or not it had shaken American confidence and whether America was now reluctant to be as aggressive in the rest of the world and would be too preoccupied with matters at home to abdicate political leadership. If you look at the foreign press over the last several days, you will see that confusion, wanting not to be pushed around by America, but wanting very much to be led by America. He said it is time, too, to break the bad habit of expecting something for nothing. Very much a campaign promise. doesn't want to keep people on welfare, prefers that there be workfare. And he said we must not expect always something for nothing, not only from government or necessarily from each other. As President Bush leaves, President Clinton comes in with a public commitment to reform the political system, to reform campaign reform. And he said exactly what you...
This is an ABC News special. Inauguration 93. Live from Washington, Barbara Walters, David Brinkley, and Peter Jennings.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is still a bright and sunny and cold and crisp and wonderful day in Washington, D.C. And that picture you see there is from the Custis Lee Mansion over Arlington National Cemetery, looking down across the Capitol, where there is a pretty darn good celebration going on. I don't know about you, but we've around here just about had time to catch our breath and return to the inaugural celebrations. In case you've been somewhere strange, the country has a new president. Bill Clinton is up there on Capitol Hill with the members of the House and the Senate and a lot of other important people in the political pantheon of the country having lunch. And we know we're going to have a good time because aside from David Brinkley here, Barbara Walters has come to join us. Hi.
Well, this should be a very good parade. It's the most mixed parade that we have had with all different kinds of groups, from gay and lesbian groups, the first time they've been invited to march in a parade, to different ethnic groups, 125 units. It's supposed to be, what, the most fun and a gala parade, but they all say that, don't they?
Yes, they do, but sometimes it's even true.
8 years ago, there was no parade. Remember, it was so cold that Ronald Reagan canceled the parade. And,
they couldn't have people outside blowing horns because the horns would stick to their lips.
That was one of the things that the Medicine Soprano Marilyn Horne was worried about this morning. It's going to be too cold, right? You tell us how you spent your morning and who have you been talking to?
Well, I spent my morning watching you.
No,
and I had a very good one.
No,
but I want to tell you one thing, though, about this luncheon. Originally, the Republican senators, you know, the gridlock was going to be broken, and this is a time of great harmony between the president and the House and the Senate. And the Republican senators, all of them, or many of them, thought they'd all be invited to this lunch. But no, the Clinton inauguration team decided that they would follow Ronald Reagan. And at Ronald Reagan's luncheon, there were very few Democrats. And so at this luncheon, there are only 10 Republican senators invited out of 250 people. So it is a Democratic president and a Democratic luncheon. And a lot of hurt feelings among the Republicans.
Well, it's great to have you here. Let's take a look at Statuary Hall, because that is indeed where it is going on at the moment. They have been running an off and on schedule today. The president actually took the oath of office just about a minute before 12 by our reckoning. It was at 12 o'clock that the Constitution requires the president to take power. And there they are in Statuary Hall, where Wendell Ford, the senator from Kentucky, who has been the master of ceremonies, for want of a better phrase, for these events, is now talking to all those who have assembled there. And they're about to exchange gifts, and they're about to have the first toast of the Clinton presidency.
Flowering cherry trees on the near side, creating a three-dimensional effect. It rests on hand-cut crystal and is engraved with your name, the presidential inauguration, and today's date, and the Congress is very honored to present this to you and to the lovely First Lady.
Well, let me just help you catch up on that a bit. He's going to be given a 9-inch hand-cut Lenox crystal bowl, the first of thousands of gifts he will get.
I'm pleased to present to you a somewhat smaller bowl.
As is befitting.
On behalf of the Congress, this crystal bowl designed and crafted by the same master artisans at Lenox. The bowl is inscribed with your name in the same engravings as the presidential gift. We hope you and your lovely wife, Tipper, will enjoy this. Now I call on the Speaker of the House of Representatives to make a presentation at this time. Mr. Speaker.
The second most powerful Democrat in the city at the moment, Thomas Foley.
President, Ms. Clinton, Vice President, Ms. Gore, it is our custom in the House and my glad duty to present each of you with a plaque on which is affixed one of the letter openers used on January 6, 1993, to open the certificates of electoral votes for President and Vice President. Each plaque notes simply that William J. Clinton of the state of Arkansas received for President of the United States 370 electoral votes. And the second plaque, that Albert Gore Jr. of the state of Tennessee received for Vice President of the United States 370 electoral votes. I hope each of you will accept these letter openers with the best wishes and heartiest congratulations of all of us in both parties of the Congress as you begin your administration. May
Not
they
for the first
symbolize
time
the
today
ease
we
with which you
take
will
note of
cut
the
through
President, if
heavy
the camera will
tangle of
stop there,
legislative
reaching over to
challenges
touch his
to the
wife.
heart of successful
Since they went
political
to
wisdom and successful government.
interfaith service this morning, there has been a tremendous amount of communication between the two of them. Barbara, I must confess that we missed you a little bit this morning because I was obliged to describe Mrs. Clinton's outfit, and I knew at the time you would do it better. So tell us something about it.
Well, I thought it was very appropriate that you were describing her outfit. I was rather relieved.
I was entranced with it.
You did rather well. Well, I think, you know what, this is almost a political message behind the clothes that Mrs. Clinton and Mrs. Gore are wearing, because they have chosen young designers, according to Mrs. Clinton's press secretary, to show that there is a whole new tradition, a whole new world out there, and designers from their hometowns, because everything isn't done in New York. They are names that we don't know. This is Connie Fales, a name that you pointed out this morning. We will now know because she's an Arkansas designer. Interesting that the new First Lady and Mrs. Gore were wearing hats, and the old First Lady, I shouldn't say the old First Lady, the former First Lady, Barbara Bush, was hatless, and so was Marilyn Quayle. I guess this is the formality. We'll talk a little more about this later, but there's an amazing, really amazing changeover between the way Hillary Clinton used to look. This is, was this the inauguration
This
of
is the swearing in of Bill Clinton. He was then Bill Clinton as governor of Arkansas.
The horn-rimmed glasses are now replaced by contact lenses. The dark brown hair is now blonde and, well, and differently coiffed. The
How about look at the way he looked?
And look at the way he looked. That's true, but she has become very glamorous, I think, and really very good-looking.
Let's pause for a second again because we want to listen to the speaker who, speaking of looks, has shed about 40 pounds in the last year and a half.
In the House and the Senate that the President comes only by invitation to the Capitol. That is a tradition that lies in our British heritage when the Stuart King entered the House of Parliament and dismissed the Long Parliament. Now, this key you may consider an advance invitation to come anytime you wish and unlock the great bronze doors and bring us to your consultation as we will bring you to our cooperation and move the country back to effective and responsive government. On behalf of the joint leadership of the Democratic and Republican parties of the House and the Senate, I present you with a working replica key to the great Columbus doors of the Capitol.
A welcome invitation from Congress, of which President Clinton said this morning in his inaugural address, powerful people maneuver for position and worry endlessly up here who's in and who's out.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
He also went on to say Americans deserve better than they've had, and he called for reform of the political system.
Present the toast to the new president, something I hope that will be appropriate. Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, my colleagues and their guests. Today, Mr. President, during the swearing-in ceremony, and I think along the parade route, you will truly see the many different faces of America. From farmers to Wall Street brokers, laborers to business owners, children to older Americans. They come from different walks of life, but they come with a common purpose: to be a part of this historic moment and to demonstrate their conviction, their certainty, and their confidence in you, Mr. President. The world will be witness not only to the peaceful transition of power, but to the overwhelming show of support. We come together today not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans with hope, to say our goal for America is the same as yours, and we look forward to great accomplishments in the weeks and months ahead. Would you stand now and join with me in a toast, Mr. President, to your good health and to this great country. Hear, hear.
There are
Thank
high
you all very much. Be
expectations
seated,
for
and Mr. Vice President, you have
President Clinton, of course, but as he enters office, according to the latest ABC News poll, 68% of Americans we've talked to regard him favorably, up 12 points since just before the election.
Senator Ford, thank you for this luncheon. To you and Jean, it is great to be able to share this with you. To Speaker and Mrs. Foley, to Majority Leader Mitchell, to Majority Leader and Mrs. Gephardt, to the Chief Justice, Mr. Rehnquist, and to Justice White, to the combined leadership, to Senator Dole, Senator Stevens, Minority Leader Bob Michael, and Minority Whip Newt Gingrich, and to all of the distinguished guests, to President Clinton and our First Lady. Boy, that sounds good. I wish I could express the emotion in my heart or the gratitude, respect, and friendship that I hold for all of you, especially my former colleagues in the House and Senate. I wish I could express the hope that we share for our country, the magic of this day, and the change it will bring. I've spent nearly 2 decades with many of you in service to our country and the men and women who are her strength. I've been honored to serve the people of Tennessee and the people of our nation, and am now honored to accept this new responsibility and this awesome challenge as a partner in doing everything I possibly can to make Bill Clinton the best and most successful president our nation has ever known. So may I return your toast, Senator Ford, with another. May we all not just listen, but truly hear. May we all not just see, but truly understand. May we all reach deep into our own hearts to summon the will to take action, to keep our commitment to the kind of democracy and the kind of government that never forgets its roots or its responsibilities, that remembers it was forged by the courage and vision and ideas of the people it was meant to serve, to our democracy.
This is the Vice President's opportunity to speak. The Vice President used to give an inaugural address. He doesn't anymore. Only the President spoke today to democracy. In that vein, President Clinton said this morning, let's give this capital back to the people to whom it belongs.
Thank you very much, Senator Ford, and Mr. Speaker, Majority Leader Gephardt, Senator Mitchell, Senator Dole, Senator Michael. I'm Representative Michael. I'd like to begin by saying I didn't get much sleep last night, and if I get through this, it'll be a tour de force. Al Gore and I stayed up a long time talking last night about this day and this country and what we hope that we could do. I want to say first how very grateful I am to the Congress for the exertions here to make this inaugural day such a meaningful and wonderful one. I would like to especially thank Senator Ford, who worked so hard to make sure everything went off without a hitch, and he did. I also thank you for the wonderful gift of Crystal, the letter opener, which I will treasure always, that proved that we did get enough electoral votes to be here today. Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to have that key. However, with all respect, I can't believe you were fully briefed about my proclivities in lobbying legislators to let me come up here without an invitation. I may be here all the time. Why, just when you said you wished me well in untangling my relationships with Congress, my head, almost as if by magic, tilted in Senator Dole's direction. And I make two serious points. Once in a generation, we really are called upon to redefine the public interest and the common ground. I honestly do believe much of what we have to do today is work that knows no necessary partisan label and does not fall easily within the conventional divisions of liberal and conservative or Republican and Democrat. The second point I wish to make is that I cannot succeed as president unless Congress itself succeeds and the American people like the Congress again too, or I seek to do. And to do, we have to work together and move forward together. So I would like, in gratitude and respect, to propose a toast to a new partnership in America's government. Here it is.
President Clinton is the very soul of brevity today, both his inaugural address and his toast here in Statuary Hall. That's Reverend Billy Graham, who gave the benediction at the inauguration this morning, which he has been doing for many years.
We had dinner last night with President Bush, just a very small group, but that's how President Bush spent his last evening.
Mr. President, exactly 2 hours and 16 minutes ago, you became President of these United States. And through the magic of your hard labor here, I'd like to give you a picture of that occasion.
Yeah,
just
wonderful.
as quick as we
Well, President Clinton spoke this morning about the magic of technology. What better example than to have a color photograph framed and presented 2 hours and 16 minutes after he became president?
We'll take it off your hands and see that it gets to Chelsea because she's keeping all the mementos. Thank you all very, very much. The luncheon is over, and we look forward to a new beginning and a great 4 years and a terrific parade and hopefully a short night for you, Mr. President, so we can go. Thank you all very, very
well,
much.
Well, Senator Ford of Kentucky, we're going to go overseas for just a moment now. You heard the Speaker of the House, Thomas Foley, there make reference to the traditions that we have inherited in this country from the British, which still pertain under that great dome. The first guest to join us this afternoon happens to be the British Prime Minister, John Major, who is in London. Good evening, Mr. Prime Minister. Good afternoon in our case.
Evening.
Thank you for joining us.
Evening.
Well, what do you think? How are they doing out here in the New World today?
Well, it seems we made a very good start. It was clearly a very powerful speech. I suspect it was a speech that will have a great deal of impact, not just in the United States, but in many other parts of the world as well.
I read the British press on a regular basis, and I read that overseas you are concerned that America be the leader in the world but not push you around. Is that a fairly accurate appraisal?
Well, I think we see ourselves as having the same sort of standards and instincts as the United States. I think we see many of the world's problems in precisely the same way. I want to make sure that that relationship continues. I think it's a relationship of mutual benefit. I'm sure it will continue.
This would be highly appropriate. Do you have any advice to offer the new president at this moment?
No. I think advice from one politician to another, if delivered, should only be delivered when requested by the politician and then in private.
Barbara.
Mr. Prime Minister, one of our newspapers here, the New York Times, has said that the new President Clinton doesn't feel perhaps as close to you as he might because he felt that you would have preferred that President Bush was reelected. I don't know whether you gave him any reason to feel that way, but I wonder if you've had any conversations with our new president, and if so, could you share them with us?
Yes, I have. We've spoken on 3 occasions. We had a substantial conversation just about 18 hours ago. So yes, we've had 3 conversations. They were very satisfactory. There was a great meeting of minds. I was a great admirer of President Bush. President Clinton knows that. George Bush became a good friend. He was a good friend, I think, not just to the United States, but he was a good friend to Europe and the rest of the world.
Do you have any doubt, Prime Minister, to doubt President Clinton's resolve on that issue?
I don't have a shred of doubt about that.
What do you think he should...
In the conversations I've had with President Clinton, I have no doubt that he will carry forward the American traditions in the way that previous presidents have done.
What do you think
and
the most difficult...
I found out, well, clearly he has a number of international problems. Firstly, he is, of course, the President of the United States, and he'll want to address himself to the internal problems and internal opportunities of the United States. But he also has a very special responsibility beyond that. The United States is the supreme superpower these days. It is the leader of the free world. Its activities abroad are of immense interest. Its leadership is of immense interest to what happens throughout the world. Now that will be a very important part of President Clinton's job in the future.
Last question.
I'm absolutely confident he'll deal with it magnificently.
I apologize for interrupting you. Last question. If he were to call you this evening and say, what's absolutely the first thing I've got to deal with overseas? Dissolution in Russia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Somalia, troubles in Germany, what would you tell him?
If only politics were so easy to pick the priorities. The fact is all of those problems need dealing with. None of them are going to go away. There'll be a constant problem on our plates, I suspect, in some cases for months, perhaps years to come. He can't pick and choose. Events will partly pick and choose, and he will have to deal with each and every one of them. But you'll find as he does so, he has many allies who share his concerns and will help him with that.
Thank you for taking the time to join us.
My pleasure.
British Prime Minister John Major. Barbara, why don't you be even a little more specific about that New York Times piece written by Maureen Dowd and Michael Kelly. They have John Major, the British Prime Minister, #1 on Bill Clinton's hit list.
That's right. Supposedly there's a short list of enemies, political enemies. But, you know, we must remember that Margaret Thatcher, who was a great fan, of course, of Ronald Reagan's, even more than she was of President Bush, although she liked him, and Prime Minister Major, their parties are certainly more similar to our Republican Party than to our Democratic Party. But I was surprised that John Major, even now, almost acknowledged his fondness for President Bush by saying how close he felt to him, because it was felt by Bill Clinton that he absolutely campaigned for President Bush. Even though they talked 18 hours ago, they've got a little repairing to do. It also, by the way, said in that article that President Clinton and his vice president are not that close ever since then Vice President Quayle had the debate with Senator Gore, and Senator Gore didn't stick up enough for Bill Clinton's character. Well, this is all kind of nitpicking. They're going to have to get along very well. But the paper said, of course, the closest partnership is not the president and the vice president, it's the president and his wife. So much for animosity on this day of great friendship.
Well, in terms of the U.S. and Britain, the phrase special relationship has had a meaning for a very long period
There
of time.
isn't much the leader of a friendly foreign country can do about American domestic politics, whether we like them or not. He can't do anything.
All right, enough of politics for a while. We're going to come back and have a parade. That's why we showed up. That's why we showed up here today. We'll be back in just a moment.
ABC News coverage of Inauguration 93. Brought to you by Jeep and Eagle, a division of the Chrysler Corporation. And Sprint, not just another phone company.
This is the plan for the B-2 bomber. This is the structure of DNA. This is a long-distance calling plan. What do they all have in common? You can't understand any one of them. Fortunately, Sprint can decipher long distance for you. With priority service, they'll review your account and let you know if you're on the right plan. It's that easy. And this is how you call Sprint.
This is our latest concept car. Of course, before we could sell it to the general public, we'd have to tone down its 214 horsepower engine and replace its specially tuned performance suspension. So when do we plan on making these changes? We don't. Introducing Eagle Vision TSI, definitely not intended for the general public.
Wow, you folks look like experienced travelers.
Well, we are staying at a Clarion hotel.
Did you know if you pay for your room with the American Express card, you can save 30%?
Sure, for business, for pleasure.
So, happy with your room?
Yeah, they told us if they couldn't make us happy, their first night's on them.
Ooh, sounds like a good deal.
Oh, and another thing.
At Clarion, they don't throw your luggage around. Tea?
Thank you. Clarion Hotels and the American Express card. For reservations, call 1-800-4CHOICE.
Sandwich improvement by Vlasic Pickles.
When building a sandwich, the most important detail is the crunchy, juicy Vlasic pickles.
Because Vlasic has the taste that guarantees a successful project.
Remember, Vlasic pickles, the sandwich improvement you can do yourself.
Tears of pain, tears of joy. But when your eyes are dry, soothe them with the tears of Murine. Closer to your own tears than other leading eye drops or artificial tears. Murine, natural tears formula.
From the nation's capital, ABC News continuing coverage of Inauguration 93. Once again, Barbara Walters, David Brinkley, and Peter Jennings.
Pennsylvania Avenue, and some of the, we don't quite know how many people gathered there today, but you shouldn't be surprised to find 1 million people or more out here for the celebrations in the nation's capital today. The weather is nice. You can tell that just by looking at what people are wearing. Though there's a guy who looked like he worked the North Sea in a British convoy 40 years ago with his binoculars. The parade has not left the capital yet, but let's go to the head of it and talk first to our Bill Greenwood, who's
Hello.
up there. Bill, you up there?
I'm here.
What are you doing? Bill, can you hear me?
I hear you.
Good. Tell us what's going on up there.
Peter, we're at the start of one of the float sections. There are 12 floats in this parade, and this is one that the Inaugural Committee particularly asked to have built. It involves a new beginning, which, as you know, is the theme of this inauguration. Mr. Fred Parham is in charge of all this. Tell us what you're trying to do, sir.
Well, what we're trying to do is we're trying to show that everybody can work together.
And you're going to build a house by the end of this parade, is that correct?
By the end of this parade, we will have a house built.
Can somebody live in it?
Somebody can live in it once the insulation's put on the inside.
All right, that's quite a project. And to show you what they mean by a new beginning, Peter, if you look at the back of this house, there are youngsters here with building blocks trying to show people that it's not only the older generation, but the young generation, too. And as you know, Bill Clinton prides himself as being a baby boomer. Well, this young lady here in the red right here is the daughter of baby boomer Stephen Stills. She is the daughter of one of the Crosby, Stills, and Nash singers who played such a part in the inaugural celebration.
Well, you know what they say, but you can't get on a float unless you got connections, right?
I guess so, Peter.
But just to clarify, that house is going to be built on a float as it goes down the parade route, right?
That's exactly right. They started about 30 minutes ago. They will be finished in a couple hours.
Okay, Bill, see what else you can find us. We'll come back and talk to you.
Okay, Peter.
Elsewhere on the parade route is ABC's Carol Simpson. Carol.
Hi, Peter. I'm down at Freedom Plaza at 13th and Pennsylvania, and the first thing I have to say about this parade is this is the most beautiful day I can ever remember. This is my 5th inaugural, and I'm burning up with clothes. We all dressed very warmly because it was very cold this morning, but now it's warmed up and it's just a beautiful day. I'm standing with a crowd of people here that have been here since 5 o'clock this morning, and we have one goal in mind, and that is to get President Clinton over to say hello to us. So all these people are going to help me.
Well, there's a prize if you do, Carol. I must tell you, we at this point do not yet know what the president's intentions are, whether he will ride all the way, whether he'll decide to walk, whether he'll ride part of the way. I suspect, as we said this morning, it may be the latter. But what's the mood, Carol? People happy? Carol, you've been out with the people for many hours now. What's the general mood?
great excitement, great anticipation. A lot of people telling me this is the first person they voted for that actually got elected. That's in this crowd here. There is this hope. That is the theme of this whole inaugural. And again, I talk to you of diversity. I look at this crowd and I see many, many ethnic groups represented here. That is different from 1988 when I was in this same spot.
Well, it's nice to have you there again. You know, I must say this business of voting, David and Barbara, reminds me. I watched a little bit yesterday of Bruce Babbitt's confirmation hearings to be Secretary of the Interior. And he said that on the evening of his nomination, he'd sat around the dining room table with his family and talked about what an important position this was, one of the oldest positions in the cabinet in the country. As we all know, Bruce Babbitt ran to become president some time ago, and he told his children at this dinner table that he was an important cabinet position he was getting. He was 7th in line to the presidency. And his son apparently said, "And that's closer than you got when you ran for office," which I thought was kind of fun. All right, this parade is about to start, and we'll be back in just a moment.
With wrinkled brows, the old have seen deep sorrow, great joy. What does it mean? The touch, the feel, the fabric of our lives. The touch, the feel of cotton, the fabric of our lives.
Sam here is giving me enough good reasons to use my Dirt Devil hand vac, but now he's giving me 5 more. When they turn the house upside down, I turn on my Dirt Devil. Its powerful revolving brush tears into dirt, chews up crumbs, and picks up pet hair. It has an extra long cord, and it's lightweight. So, I'd say my Dirt Devil is the pick of the litter. Right, Sam? Right. Get a Dirt Devil and put the power of an upright in the palm of your hand.
The new Jeep, the world's only 4x4 with a standard driver's side airbag.
Both Visa and American Express Gold cards can get you to England for the golf vacation of your life.
Charlie, how did your yank do?
Well, we're up on the 9th, see, and he wants to be up in 2, so he puts everything he's got into the shop, including his new graphite driver.
But should you have a stroke of bad luck, only Visa Gold can get you back on course. Because Cape Cornwall's only pro shop doesn't take American Express.
Keep a grip on it.
Visa Gold. It's everywhere you want to be.
ABC News coverage of Inauguration 93 will continue from Washington after this from our ABC stations.
Wednesday, the men are put to the test. First, does Tim measure up?
How does your mate rate? How do you rate a guy who's already an ace?
I think you mispronounced that.
An all-new home improvement.
Look how long we've been dreaming about that athletic center.
Then, will Hayden use Luther to get money from a rich widow?
We did it, we did it, we did it!
Oh, my God!
Coverage Wednesday.
Finally, a credit card reward program for everybody. Earn rewards even if you don't charge a lot. From shopping to travel discounts. Or save for a free flight. Chase bonus dollars. Is your credit card this rewarding? Bonus dollars from Chase Manhattan. Profit from the experience.
At 9X, we believe that communication can help bring us all together.
You lend big bucks to your little darlings, and they never pay you back. How to make your kids grow up and pay up on the next Oprah. Today at 4, right here on Channel 7.
Katie Beers goes back to school. First pictures at 5.
On the east side of the Capitol, President Clinton, family, Vice President Gore and his family, come out from their first lunch with the congressional leaders, both Republican and Democrat, and Chelsea, who looked like she was going to fall asleep in church this morning. It was so hot in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, but has appeared ever since then to enjoy herself. Come out where President Clinton is now going to review the first of the troops who were here. This is a very, very strong military tradition, of course, to any inaugural parade. Henry Graff, the historian emeritus from Columbia University, is with us. Henry, as we take a look at this military gathering on the east side of the Capitol here today, tell us the involvement.
During the history of parades, there have been a variety of changes. At one time, it was largely military. And of course, during the War of 1812, when this kind of thing began, there was a need to show how strong America was. These parades, though, usually began at the White House and accompanied the president-elect to the Capitol. And then on the way back, the new president, with his predecessor, would stop off at the hotel that the predecessor was going to be at, and the president would come back to the White House and have a private meal with his family. Over the years, this has varied a great deal. It's just about 100 years ago that the parade begins at the Capitol and goes to the White House. And at various times, it's had more or less military activity. It is a very American institution. It's a time for celebrating an occasion, and not a historic one in the sense that it happened in the past, but something that happened just a couple of hours ago. And it's a time for fun. Presidents have enjoyed this, and almost all of the recent presidents, in writing their memoirs, talk about what a brilliant experience it was for them. Most of us can't imagine what it is to be president and to have this kind of salute. Calvin Coolidge, whose words generally are not inscribed in marble, wrote in his autobiography, "The presidency is like the glory of the morning sunrise. It can only be told. It cannot be told, it can only be experienced." And that, we can guess, is something that Bill Clinton and presumably Hillary are learning today.
Let's listen. The first familiarization for President Clinton by a senior Army officer of the various units into contact with which he will come on many occasions in the course of this presidency. Of course, he has his own guard, the president's own at the White House, and of course the Marine Band, which has long been regarded as the president's band. Cokie Roberts is up there and has been at the luncheon and in the rotunda for much of the morning. Cokie, what has the mood been and what have you picked up?
Much of the morning, we weren't actually allowed into the luncheon, but I talked to Speaker Foley before he gave the key to the Capitol. And by the way, the doors that Bill Clinton has just been standing in front of are the doors to which he now has the key. And I am told that key actually works, that you can open these huge bronze so-called Columbus doors, because they have the scenes of Christopher Columbus arriving in America on them in bronze, that it actually will unlock those doors. I asked what they would do if Bill Clinton actually used the key, since the president is really not expected to come to the Capitol without the invitation of the Congress. The Sergeant-at-Arms said, jokingly, I want to underline here, it was a joke, said, we'd probably just call out our troops here and send them back to the White House. But it's a point, you know, Peter. These are separate branches. This is the day of celebrating unity. But I was thinking about that lunch you had in there. Senator Byrd, chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Congressman Natcher, chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. They've been here many, many years. They've seen presidents come. They've seen presidents go. They expect to see this president go and still be here. And they they see themselves as a much greater continuity of government than any president.
At the same time, Cokie, it has been quite some time since the Democrats have controlled both branches of government, and that puts enormous pressure on Bill Clinton, doesn't it?
It puts tremendous pressure on him and on the Democratic Party as a whole. As one Democrat said to me before the election, you mean if we have both houses of Congress and the president, the people will hold us responsible? That is the idea. And I think that we have seen a lot of sense of wanting to see some responsibility in Washington. Again, that's what these monuments celebrate, is the notion of government functioning, government being something grand and glorious that works. I must say that giving Bill Clinton a picture, a framed picture of his own inauguration 2 hours after it happened, is the fastest I've ever seen government work.
And there, of course, is another piece of presidential apparatus which we'll all become even more accustomed to, which was in that Cadillac. He's now using a Cadillac, whereas President Bush used a Lincoln. He appears to be carrying a thermos, because he's hardly got in the car when he sat down and poured himself a glass of something hot. Usually decaffeinated coffee, as I recall, Barbara, or diet drink of some sort.
Well, he's had very little time to eat. I think they've all lost weight. Mrs. Gore said that she's down to a size 6 from all of the activities. Maybe I'd like to get the secret. But I think they're all exhausted, and they've got 11 balls to go to tonight. By tomorrow morning, when they have an open house, by tickets, however, it's still considered an open house, we're going to have an exhausted president and first lady.
We will have a chance as the afternoon goes on to indicate, I think, how this inauguration resembles those of other presidents. Barbara mentions the open house, tried by the Lincolns, among other people. But for now, let's just take a look down the parade route, down Pennsylvania Avenue, where hundreds of thousands of people wait to greet their new president and to celebrate this day in American history. We will be back for the whole parade down Pennsylvania Avenue in just a moment.
From the nation's capital, ABC News coverage of Inauguration 93 will continue in a moment.
This reading material will give you an idea of how good the new Eagle Vision TSI really is. Of course, we think you'll find this reading material to be even more convincing. The new Eagle Vision TSI, a truly remarkable sports sedan. And remember, you read it here first.
In this business, you need to know all you can about security. And I thought I did, until today. One of my customers handed me this Citibank Visa card.
Look at this.
And would you believe it had her photo right on it? So how could anyone else use it? It's such a simple idea, it's brilliant. You know, when something's important to me, I protect it. That's why I'll be carrying a Citibank card.
Not just Visa, Citibank Visa.
This week, history is being made. Not here, but in the kitchen. This week, Ore-Ida introduces fast fries. So crispy, so delicious, you won't believe they came from your oven and not from a fast food place. Fast fries. They're that good.
Hello?
When you think about plastic, you may think about things like toy cars on your living room carpeting. Think again about a real car with dent-resistant plastic fenders. When you look at plastic bottles, you probably think they can't be recycled. Take another look. Millions are being recycled every day into things like plastic toy cars and your living room carpeting. To learn more, call this number for a free booklet and take another look at plastic.
Thursday, Andy Griffith teaches a lesson in law.
Have you ever seen The Perfect Murder?
But the homework can be lethal.
I think you had a hand in this. The police think I'm in on this?
Matlock. Then there's romance at Jack's place.
Who's a girl?
You say anything about a girl.
But not everybody's happy about it.
Do you think that Jack could consider giving you the night off?
Jack's place, Thursday.
Tomorrow, Clinton administration forecast from Senator Joe Biden and Dick Cheney.
Plus dancing the inaugural night away on Good Morning America from Washington tomorrow.
Don't want to make too much of the business that President Clinton is now using a Cadillac, whereas President Bush used a Lincoln, but I am reliably informed moments ago that President-elect Clinton saw the Cadillac. The White House needed a new one, and the Secret Service needed a new one, and he liked the picture of it. And there it be.
It's more tank than car.
Yes,
bulletproof glass that has heavy steel all around, bulletproof. It's very safe. Very safe place to be.
As our executive producer Jeff Growling said, it gets yards to the gallon.
Or gallons to the yard.
So the vice president should be against it, right? Our environmental vice president should be riding in a little small car that doesn't take a lot of gas.
Well, if he complains, he'd have to walk.
Horseback, maybe, huh?
Right, maybe.
Well, so begins this inaugural parade. An American reunion, new beginnings, renewed hope is its theme. People from all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and the U.S. territories. And up on Capitol Hill on the parade route with ABC's Bill Greenwood is Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell from Colorado, who is the first Native American to be elected to the Senate. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, Peter, when you talk about Native Americans, this is one of the real rare ones here. Senator, the Colorado senator, all decked out in your Indian outfit. How long did it take to do this, Senator?
Well, it took really 3 different ladies worked on this, one sister and some cousins, and it took them about 3 years to put it together.
What significance do you make out of today's inauguration?
Well, President Clinton said he wanted it to kind of be all-American, and I think it is. It's been just a wonderful celebration. We're delayed a little bit here at the parade. I understand he's not in place yet at the reviewing stand, but we'll get going pretty soon. But I was one of the co-chairs of the National Indians for Clinton Committee, and so we wanted to honor him. Indians believe in participating to honor people, and so these chiefs that are riding with me and ladies are from tribes all over the country.
In order to get down here, Senator, you must have had to leave and miss some of the inaugural ceremonies, didn't you?
I missed a little bit of it, yeah, because the Secret Service wanted everybody to stay in place, including us, until after the president left. Originally, this was supposed to start at 2, and it was so close that I thought I wouldn't have time to get the horse ready, and so the president is a wonderful man, but to a horseman, your horse comes first, and so I had to come down and get him ready.
Bill,
thank you very much. Yes, Peter.
Ask the senator a question I've always wondered. What are those feathers? What's the source of them?
Senator Peter Jennings wants to know the significance of the feathers.
No, where'd they come from?
In Indian...
Where did they come from?
Well, these are eagle feathers, but they're not taken from eagles that have been killed for the feathers. We get them from the National Bird Depository in Pocatello, Idaho. As long as we're enrolled Indians, we can legally own them and keep them and have them. We can't buy them or sell them any more than anybody else can.
Thank you very much, Senator Campbell, very much.
Bill,
Peter, back to you.
Bill, I was going to ask you to go on a bit more. This is not often. I've made a mistake here. Senator Nighthorse Campbell is not the first Native American to come to the Senate. He's the first since 1925, but he's certainly the first I've seen done up in what I believe is Northern Cheyenne. Could you ask him to tell us a little more, and what is the paint on his, what is the significance? Bill Greenwood? Bill Greenwood?
Hello?
Bill Greenwood?
Yes.
Can you still hear me?
I can, Peter.
Yes, you're still on the air. Would you perhaps ask the senator a couple more questions for us?
I'm sorry, we're getting all sorts of interference here, Peter, but I hear you want to ask the senator a couple more questions.
Well, I wonder if you... I know that when he stands up, this headdress of his almost touches the ground. Could he tell us something more about what he's wearing?
Senator Peter notes the length of your headdress and would like to know a little bit more about the rest of your outfit, if you would.
It's made of white buckskin with beadwork with Cheyenne designs. The headdress, normally and traditionally in Indian, you save up feathers, and they're based on good deeds. In the old days, it was for war or so on. These happen to be saved from the years I was in sports. I used to be on the U.S. Olympic team, and they were wins when I was on the international judo mats, and this bonnet was made for me by the Cheyenne elders years ago.
How long does it take to make this intricate beadwork?
This took about 3 years, working part-time, 2 of my cousins and 1 of my sisters. But with the bonnet, the headdress, the difficulty is getting matched feathers because we can't kill these eagles, and so we have to kind of save them. Some of them are very old, come down through the family, and others we get through, as I mentioned, the bird depository, but that's the hard part.
Thank you very much, Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell of Colorado. Peter, back to you.
You learn something every day, Peter.
Thank you, Bill, very much. As we said, Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell, elected in November for the first time a Native American has come to serve in the Senate since 1929. Somewhere on a parade float out there is our White House correspondent, Britt Fune. What is this, Britt? You refuse to walk?
That's right, Peter. Clinton doesn't get out and walk. I'm not going to get out and walk. As you can see, that is the Clintons' limousine right behind me. And in it, as you noted, when they got in were Chelsea Clinton and the holders now of diplomatic passports number 1 and 2, which formerly belonged to the Bushes. Everybody, of course, along here is dying to get these people to get out of the car and come over and approach them. The fear among the parade planners is that if Clinton does it, and given his propensity for touching and hugging people, he'll never get to the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue.
But there's no doubt in your mind, I assume, Britt, that he is going to get out of that car at some point.
I would be very surprised if he didn't. It was the most memorable moment, as you recall, about Jimmy Carter's inaugural. And George Bush did it on again, off again during his trip down to the White House 4 years ago, and it was a great success then, so I expect it any minute.
Well, as you come down the north side of the Capitol, you're on Constitution, aren't you there now?
I'm sorry, Peter, could you repeat that? I couldn't quite hear you.
I was just saying that as you come down what looks to be like the north side of the Capitol, you can probably give us a better sense of the crowds than we can get from here.
Peter, this crowd is very large indeed. It looks to me to be noticeably larger than it was 4 years ago. In the faces of these people, there is a level of excitement. You always see it in these parades, but this seems to me to be a cut above what I've seen before. I should tell you, Peter, as one who was born and grew up, to the extent I grew up at all in this city, this appears to me to be one of the most well-attended inaugurals with a higher sense of expectations about the result of the presidency to follow than I have seen. Of course, all of it today is immensely assisted by this weather. The sun is very warm. Sometimes in the winter in Washington, the sun will be out and you can't feel it, but you can feel it here. I'm told it's about the mid-40s, 44 degrees, and as you can see from the pictures here, these people are having a wonderful time.
Well, of course, people have come in from all over the country for this inauguration, but Washington, D.C. is a Democratic city, make no mistake about that. So a turnout like this for a Democratic president is perhaps to some extent to be expected. Let's go up to the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue now, where ABC's Jeff Greenfield is standing by. Jeff?
Hi, Peter. I'm at 15th and Pennsylvania, where the avenue turns. This is the higher-priced neighborhood where people with connections or who are contributors have seats. Some of them even have name tags. And I do want to point out that there's one danger about Clinton getting out and walking, and it's not security. There are 7 fast food restaurants between the Capitol and the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue. And given Clinton's proclivities, if he gets out, he ain't getting to the White House till midnight.
Well, there were 27 McDonald's between Monticello at the White House, and he didn't stop at any of them.
By the way, this is one of the events that is free. I mean, the people standing along don't have to pay. The tickets, if you want to sit in the grandstand, is from $10 to $100. And there's been a lot of talk about how expensive this inauguration is. $28 million, just $2 million less than Bush's inauguration celebration, and that was considered much too much money. But here you can go out if you can see anything at all and stand there for free.
Supposedly it will pay for itself, but I doubt it.
There's the president's mother, Virginia Kelly, only the 7th mother of a president ever to be present at her son's inauguration, going off to the stand outside the White House where she and other members of the family, including Roger Clinton, who is behind her.
That's her husband next to her. It's her 4th husband. She has been widowed 3 times. And Mr. Kelly is a retired, I think he was in the grain business. And Roger Clinton has been, as we say, cleaning up. He has a $200,000 new contract with Atlantic Records. As someone says, it's not enough to be the president's brother, you've got to have talent. And another executive there said, it's not enough to have talent, you've got to be the president's brother.
Whatever the case, he's a young man. He's 10 years younger than his brother. He's 36 years old. He's had some hard times in life, and it is wonderful to see the joy on his face at the Democratic convention when his brother got the nomination. Whatever political persuasion you may have been at the time, there was a love and deep affection between the two of them that appears to be so special that at one point in Arkansas, when the brother Roger was in difficulty with the police, Bill Clinton, they went to Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton said, arrest him. He was so concerned that his brother be put on the straight and narrow.
But he also did help. It's true what you're saying, of course. He did help to bring him up. He was the older brother, and he really was almost the father to him.
Jeff Greenfield, the last time we heard from you a couple of hours ago, you had just begun to absorb the president's inauguration speech and hold forth in your usual eloquent manner. What do you think now that you've had a couple of hours to think about this morning?
I think it's also clear, apart from the obvious Kennedy-esque notions, that he is looking for a way to reach a constituency whose hopes he raised and to tell them, at least today, he has not forgotten them. Part of the speech was crafted in response to the criticism, I believe, that developed during the transition that Clinton was already backing away from his campaign promises. So all of his talk to the American people about you forced the season on us is a way to say I've heard you. The other thing that occurs to me is how much Ross Perot had to do with the drafting of this speech. Obviously, he didn't write it, but when Clinton was saying we've got to get power and influence off the backs of the people, give the capital back to the people, H. Ross Perot was in a sense over Bill Clinton's shoulder while he was speaking. Peter?
Thanks very much, Jeff. We'll be back in a moment to see, as you can see, the parade crowd gets deeper and wider as they come down off Capitol Hill and move along Pennsylvania Avenue, the main street of Washington, so named for Pennsylvania after the state of Pennsylvania lost its bid to have the nation's capital located in Pennsylvania. It has the honor of a street which David Brinkley points out on a regular basis is not quite as straight as it should be, thanks to the Treasury, right, David?
Well, thanks to Andrew Jackson.
That's true.
It's supposed to be a straight line in the L'Enfant plan from the Capitol to the White House. But Jackson insisted on putting a Treasury building on a corner which required the avenue to jog around it. And you will have seen before, no doubt, turns made necessary by Andrew Jackson's bullheadedness.
In a moment will come the first of the floats and the bands and the individuals and the donkeys, etc. from 50 states. We'll be right back.
ABC News coverage of Inauguration 93 will continue after this message and a word from our ABC stations.
This is one of the easiest places for a Jeep Cherokee to go. But not because of its proven capability or its legendary Jeep ruggedness. What makes it so easy to bring the classic Jeep Cherokee here is the price.
Now save an additional $500 on new 93 Jeep Cherokees.
If you're printing to the LPT1, try printing to the LPT1.
C:\Windows. The device command in this example sets up the HIM.
Oops. What did I do?
I don't know. Page
What are you
99.
guys doing? You've been fooling with that thing for 3 days now.
Making it easy to use, so we'll be more productive.
If it is productive much longer, we'll go out of business.
If you want a computer that's easy to use, there's still only one way to go.
Wow, you folks look like experienced travelers.
Well, we are staying at a Clarion hotel.
Did you know if you pay for your room with the American Express card, you can save 30%?
Sure, for business, for pleasure.
So, happy with your room?
Yeah, they told us if they couldn't make us happy, their first night's on them.
Ooh, sounds like a good deal.
Oh, and another thing.
At Clarion, they don't throw your luggage around. Tea?
Thank you. Clarion Hotels and the American Express card. For reservations, call 1-800-4CHOICE.
You make me feel so young. Promise extra light, great taste, with half the saturated fat and calories of margarine. You make me feel so young. Promise, get heart smart.
Take a close look at these two spaghetti sauces, Prego on the left and Ragu Old World style on the right, and decide for yourself which one comes out on top. We think the message is getting through. Prego, homemade taste. It's in there.
Primetime goes to Washington. You hear about waste, fraud, mismanagement. You read about red tape, favors, but you won't believe what we uncover. It's what our new president's about to face. Washington throwing your money away. Every primetime correspondent is on the case. It's us and them, Thursday.
Finally, a credit card reward program for everybody. Earn rewards even if you don't charge a lot. From shopping to travel discounts. Or save for a free flight. Chase bonus dollars. Is your credit card this rewarding? Bonus dollars from Chase Manhattan. Profit from the experience.
Are you ready for your driving lesson? Mom. Okay, lesson number 1. The new Ford Probe has been completely redesigned with a new sleek look. Mom. The inside is all new with more leg and headroom. She never listens to me. And under the hood is a tough new 2.5-liter V6. Mom, I know all about the new Ford Probe. I just asked for the keys. And lesson number 2 is, I'll drive.
The new Ford Probe, only at your Tri-State quality Ford dealer.
Come on, Mom, turn it down.
Keep smoking crack, and eventually you'll be left with nothing.
Katie Beers goes back to school. First pictures at 5.
In 1913, this is what Pennsylvania Avenue would have looked like. And this is what it looks like today. You have to do it once more, if you wouldn't mind, Roger Goodman, our director, in order to fully appreciate from 1913 to 1993. In 80 years, this is what has become of Pennsylvania Avenue. And as David Brinkley was pointing out this morning, it was for a long period of time, several years ago, a real mess, a real grungy street, David, and then they began to pick it up.
Yeah, it filled up with novelty stores, souvenir stores selling T-shirts with funny sayings on them, and fireworks, that kind of junk. And John Kennedy was disgusted with it. And he formed a committee to study it and then to do something about it, and Congress put up the money, and a lot of private money was spent. And it's now, it's not perfect by any means, but it's a whole lot better looking than it was.
Now, if we can stay with that picture for a moment, this suggests to me something. This suggests to me that President Clinton or somebody in this joint inaugural committee has prevailed on the Secret Service, because the Secret Service was, for one thing, going to go to the Willard Hotel, which isn't very far from that spot, and nail shut all the windows that fronted on Pennsylvania Avenue. And the operators of all the other buildings along the parade route had been warned not to use balconies or rooftops during the parade. We all know there are Secret Service agents and sharpshooters all over those roofs, but it is really nice to see the public there as well.
Some of those buildings are new. I think those two have apartments in them. People live in them.
I don't think that'll make much difference to the Secret Service if they wanted your window closed.
Well, in that car the president is in, you'd need some kind of cannon to do him any harm.
Can I ask you a piece of strange trivia?
Of course.
Okay, I hear that during the Civil War, the area around the Treasury in Pennsylvania Avenue was a red light district, and the ladies of the evening were put in a separate section by a man named Fighting Joe Hooker, who was the general at the time, and that is why to this day ladies of the evening are sometimes called hookers. Is that true?
Well, you asked David Brinkley that. If I may interrupt just a bit, I have a better Brinkley to answer this question. We haven't had a chance yet this afternoon to introduce our other resident historian from Columbia University. I get a picture of him, Alan Brinkley, David's son.
What do you know about hookers?
Well, what a way to start,
Very
Alan.
little.
Alan, welcome to our broadcast. It was so nice to have you this morning. This is David Brinkley's son, Alan, who has been at Columbia University in New York since 1991. Henry Graff, his partner in crime upstairs, has been there since 1946. Alan, what are your impressions about today, and can you answer Barbara's question?
I can't answer Barbara's question, so I'll move quickly on to my impressions of today. I think one of the things that's impressed me the most today is the sense of generational change, and Clinton, of course, alluded to that several times in his address. We're at a point where, after 32 years, a generation has, in a sense, passed from the scene, at least in terms of national leadership. All the presidents, from John Kennedy to George Bush, were born in about the same 10-year period. And now here comes Bill Clinton, who is, I think, 22 years younger than George Bush. I think that's the biggest gap, that may be the biggest gap in our history.
Let me interrupt you for just a second, Alan. He has a microphone in his hand. I suspect he's able to say hello to the crowd from inside that car. Alan, please continue.
I'm sorry. I think for a lot of people of Clinton's generation, my generation, which is the 60s generation, the baby boom generation, the Vietnam generation, there's a real sense today of sort of having arrived, and sort of here we are. And I think for people of that generation, there's a lot of excitement and also probably some uneasiness at that thought.
And a little fatigue, I might add.
Yeah, no excitement there.
Alan, as you've been looking at this all day today and listening to the speeches, look back a little and tell us what other inaugurals you think Clinton has used to make up his, because this is all meant to represent his public personality, isn't it?
Well, it clearly is, and he said that in reading inaugural addresses, he was most impressed, as I think someone said earlier in the broadcast, by Lincoln, by Wilson, by Roosevelt, and by Kennedy. There was obviously a lot of Kennedy here. There was something of Roosevelt, too, the sense that there's a crisis and that he's responding to it, the specificity about at least his goals, if not any concrete details. And there was something of Wilson as well. Wilson talked about the positive uses of government, bringing government into the arena of the economy and other things in a way that it had not been before, and Clinton made similar references today in his speech. So I think all of those speeches that he admired obviously played a role in his own address. As far as the ceremony goes, presidents don't have very much control over the ceremony. I think the Andrew Jackson inaugural obviously played some role in his thinking. He's having an open house tomorrow, as Bush did. So as Andrew Jackson did.
And the other thing, of course, is that if you look at the inauguration in its extended form, the bus ride from Monticello, David Brinkley, is a reflection of the Jefferson inauguration 1801.
He came as close as he could to following Jefferson's route from Monticello to Washington. Most of it he couldn't use because they're muddy little roads full of curves and going through the woods, and he couldn't go through them on those big buses they had. So they did the best they could and came somewhat close.
You know, I'm sorry.
Please, Ron.
I was just going to say that Professor Brinkley talked about the difference in age between George Bush and Bill Clinton. I think there are many people who might think that Bill Clinton is our youngest president. He is not. He's 46. Our youngest was Teddy Roosevelt at 42. Our oldest was, we all know this, our oldest was Ronald Reagan at 69. Hillary Clinton, by the way, is 45, and now that I've reeled off all those numbers, I can forget them.
No, you can't, because I want to know who was the youngest First Lady.
I'm back to her.
I don't know.
Back to research, guys.
Yeah, back to the research part.
We'll see what happens when you start this kind of thing. In all of our hotel rooms in Washington this week, those of us who stay in hotels, unlike David Brinkley, there have been these wonderful books of trivia and first facts. There's a whole industry of memorabilia that grows up around such occasions. I was thinking when the first crystal bowl was presented to President Clinton, of one of my best pieces of memorabilia now is a plate from the wedding of Prince Charles
which we did together.
And Diana, which Barbara, you and I did together.
By the way, that crystal Lenox is the best American crystal in China, and that's what Nancy Reagan was so criticized for. Do you remember when she ordered all of the china for the White House? By the way, I may not know the youngest, however, we were talking about this earlier. The first woman to ride in an inaugural parade was Helen Taft. When Theodore Roosevelt went right to the railroad station and said, I'm not going to ride back in this parade, I'm finished with all of this, the new President Taft's wife said, well, I'll go. And she became the first woman, and ever since the wife has been a part of the inaugural parade. So here's to Helen Taft. 1909, that was.
They rode in those days, of course, as you can see, in an open carriage.
Taft, while he was president, gained 25 pounds. And as you see in that picture, he didn't need it.
He didn't jog either. This isn't going to happen to Bill Clinton. I wonder if he'll still jog now.
Well, he jogged up Pennsylvania Avenue yesterday.
But he wasn't president. You know, every president always says in recent years, I'm going to get out and around. George Bush said, I'm going to go visit people. I'm going to go to... They don't do it.
Can't.
But this, I think, presents a more challenging problem for the Clintons than perhaps for others. You have the enormous sense, particularly the other night listening to their interview with Diane Sawyer, of how they value their privacy. And when she asked what would worry them most, it was this ability to keep contact with his family, to be able to do the things he wants, like jog, to be able to go out and pick up a cup of coffee somewhere. There's no doubt that he risks losing some of his charm for some of the voters if he finds himself locked behind the gates of the White House.
And you know, when you talk about privacy, a lot of us were thinking about Chelsea in a very sympathetic way. This is a child who's going to have her whole adolescence in front of us.
It's terrible.
And if he has another term, she will be 21. I mean, when do you have your first kiss with the Secret Service men? I'm being very serious about this. We're going to see her go from perhaps 12 years old to young womanhood in front of all of our eyes. It's very tough for a child.
Well, you mentioned 21. We're still checking. Nancy Gerbiner, who's our research producer here, is still checking. But she does tell me that Frances Folsom was 21 years old when she married then-President Grover Cleveland in 1886.
That's right. She was his ward. And she was married in the White House, right? I think in the Red Room. The Red Room, well, whatever. We're fudging the Red or the Blue Room. I wasn't there at the time. But she was his ward, and it was rather shocking at the time that he married this very young and beautiful woman.
Now, while we watch this parade, the whole transition in government is occurring, and nowhere is that more evident for us at the moment than it is over at the Pentagon. It is true that the Secretary of Defense is going to be Secretary of Defense, Dick Cheney, for about another 50 minutes, but over at the Pentagon, John McBethy, you can tell us about the changes.
Some of the changes that are underway, Peter, they have already taken down Dick Cheney's nameplate from the Pentagon. Workmen have very quietly stuck up Les Aspen's new name outside the door. And while the inaugural speech was on, they were shampooing the carpets inside his office. Those are the sort of silent things that happen. The military, meanwhile, has been standing by and monitoring very carefully what's going on around the world. Another little drama is about to unfold up on the Capitol, where the Senate is going to vote to confirm Les Aspen. He will be taken into a back room immediately after that, and he will be sworn in by a man named Doc Cook, a 72-year-old gentleman who is the senior civil servant here in the Pentagon.
Thanks very much, John. Les Aspen, who is the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, a man who Governor Clinton believes is going to be precisely the right Secretary of Defense for him, for a new world order and a military which, by financial definition and mission definition, is going to change. The Cold War has given way to the disorder of the new world order, and Les Aspen, who has had a long political military association with the Pentagon, is going to be the new Secretary of Defense in about 48 minutes from now. Now, Carol Simpson's down on the parade route just about where the president's car is. Carol, is the president talking to the people?
The president is still in the car, and to the great disappointment of all the people that are here. I've heard people say, I thought he was supposed to be the populist president, and they're a little disappointed that the windows weren't even rolled down. So I don't know. There were some concerns about security that may be dictating how much contact he has with the people.
Carol, we can see him in the car talking on a microphone. Now, he may be working for a rival network, I don't know, but is he talking to people, and can you hear a loudspeaker on the car?
You can barely hear it because there's a lot of noise, but it looks like he's just saying, hello, how you doing, that kind of thing. At least at our location, that's what he did.
You're at Freedom Plaza. You're halfway down Pennsylvania Avenue almost.
That's right. Here comes Senator Gore. He's locked up tight behind windows as well.
You know, it's possible that he's talking to the front of the car. You know, some of these automobiles, you don't think so? You think he's talking to the crowd?
No, I think he's talking to the crowd, or he thinks he's talking to the crowd. At any rate, we'll check it out and be right back.
Hi, may I take your order? Hello? How can I help you? Hello? Hello? Hello?
This week, history is being made. Not here, but in the kitchen. This week, Ore-Ida introduces fast fries. So crispy, so delicious, you won't believe they came from your oven and not from a fast food place. Fast fries. They're that good.
Hello?
If you're ever in Spain, you can walk down any street and find hundreds of wonderful things to buy. From hand-tooled leather, to fragrant flowers, to the most beautiful hand-painted ceramics. But occasionally, you'll need extra cash to buy them. So bring your Visa card. Because in Spain, not only do thousands more places welcome Visa, so do thousands more cash machines. And that's something American Express can't come close to. Visa, it's everywhere you want to be.
Because no other pain is like your headache pain.
What the hell where it hurts?
Now there's new aspirin-free Bayer Select for headaches.
What the hell where it hurts? With Bayer Select.
It contains a powerful aspirin-free pain reliever, plus a second ingredient, which together help relieve pounding headache pain. New Bayer Select for headaches, because all pain is not the same.
What the hell when it hurts with Bayer Select.
Jeep Grand Cherokee Limited. With an available 220 horsepower V8 and exclusive standard driver's side airbag, no other vehicle gives you so much latitude.
Great news that we're hosting TGIF this Friday. Yeah.
Oh, that's great, son. What's Friday?
Huh?
Drop in on TGIF this Friday, starting with Family Matters.
I'm fine.
Then This Carpenter's Really Built.
Frank?
Get an eyeful on Step by Step, then Baby Gets Potty Trained.
Hi there, Mr. Toilet.
You'll be flushed with laughter on Dinosaurs, and Brody dates a single mother.
Wow, when I was your age, I couldn't even have my own phone.
Camp Wilder on TGIF.
Friday. I like this concept.
You're ahead of your time, Dad.
Well, we're all sitting here saying it would be totally out of character if President Clinton didn't get out of his limousine and walk partway to the White House, and he paid attention and got out. And Britt Hume, you're closer to him than anybody.
He's right now at the corner of 15th and Pennsylvania Avenue, right there where the Treasury Department is, Peter. And what is striking, apart from the sight of him out the street and the excitement of the crowd, is that as we pass these blocks and look back up 14th Street, up 13th Street, and then down this peculiar little block of Pennsylvania Avenue before we came here, it is chock-a-block with people. I have never seen such a crowd in these streets.
Well, it's very refreshing, Britt, to see him get out of the car, I must say. Barbara Walters particularly was sitting here and saying, oh, wouldn't it be terrible and out of character, and how it would have seemed that things had changed so radically. But there he is. It's a beautiful day. No coats, right, Britt?
Peter, I rather suspect that he had to be dissuaded by the security people from going over and plunging himself into the crowd. I have never seen a public figure with a greater taste for that than Bill Clinton. He loves to do it. It seems to mean something to him personally. He seems to draw something from it. Rare is the end of an event, particularly at the end of a day when he has nowhere else to go, that this man does not plunge into the crowd and try, if he can, to touch every person in the room, along the street, wherever it is.
Well, this is a little bit of a repeat of a conversation we had earlier this morning as we see him out there, but Britt is absolutely correct, I think, from everybody who's covered him up close, that he derives energy from this. And to be cut off from this, to be cut off from this democratic contact with people by the Secret Service would be appalling.
What must he be feeling? We keep talking about it, but this dream since childhood. And by the way, we were talking earlier about the fashions and Hillary's disregard. You know, she doesn't want to be a fashion plate. Her press secretary had sent out exactly what she was wearing, a fuchsia dress. And she got up this morning, I guess, Mrs. Clinton, and said, I don't feel like wearing that fuchsia dress. So what? Does it matter what's put out? Like pink? She put on what she's comfortable in and what was good for a day where she might want to walk without a coat. She looks good.
What effect will this have on the fashion industry, Barbara? Well,
you know, the fashion industry, we sometimes make fun of it, but it's one of the biggest industries in this country. Right? And what this means is that there'll be a great many new designers we haven't heard of, like Sarah Phillips, who's only 37 years old, who made the dress that Mrs. Clinton's going to be wearing tonight. Yes, the established designers, the Bill Blass, the Oscar de la Rentas, the Scazi, who designed for Mrs. Bush, they're still there. But this is a younger generation of names we don't know, less expensive in price. And they're going to have their chance, too, just as we have a new and younger president and first lady. So it's good for the fashion industry. It's American-made clothes and clothes that are comfortable. And that's about all I want to say about fashion for the moment, because if I go on much more, I'm going to start talking about Socks the cat, and those are the two things I kept saying I wasn't going to dwell on today. But I know more about Socks the cat than I think anyone wants to know.
Well, of course, we remind people we're talking about a new generation. Bill Clinton is 46, and Hillary Rodham Clinton is 45. She used to be just Hillary Rodham, and then when that became of some political concern and difficulty to him as governor of Arkansas, she decided to become Hillary Rodham Clinton, HRC, it says on all the moving boxes that have come up from Little Rock to the White House. Barbara, they can't have brought everything with her from Little Rock. Do you know what they brought that was special?
Well, the beds, I understand, stay from White House to White House. Every president's wife has the opportunity, if she wants to redecorate, but she doesn't have to. One of the things that I think is interesting, Mrs. Bush was extremely nice to Mrs. Clinton, as she should have been, in showing her around, showing her even the laundry chute. Took time, introduced Mrs. Clinton to everyone in the White House. The reason for this, and Mrs. Bush has said to friends, is that Mrs. Reagan did not do it with her. In all of the years that the Reagans were in the White House, the Bushes were never in the private quarters. And Mrs. Bush never really got to see the area until she actually came in as the First Lady. And in the 4 years that the Bushes were in the White House, they never had the Reagans to a state dinner. So although the lady superficially expressed a friendship, there was not a great deal of affection. Mrs. Bush said this would not happen between her and Mrs. Clinton, and Mrs. Clinton knows everything she could know at this very brief period about the White House, where she'll live, what rooms she'll use, and where the laundry chute is.
Now, I have a question for you. It was put to me by the curator of the White House, who's in charge of the interior.
I hope it's about hookers. I'm very...
No.
I'm sorry, David. Go ahead.
He said, which First Lady do you think, in modern times, which one did the best job of redecorating?
Oh, that's Jackie Kennedy.
No, that's what everyone...
You're going to say Mrs.
No, I'm going to tell you what he said.
Oh, I see.
Pat Nixon. Pat Nixon.
Isn't that interesting? We wouldn't expect it.
And this is the curator. He's been there a long time. He knows every foot of the building.
Well, I think Jackie Kennedy did the downstairs.
Well, she did a lot.
Yeah.
Let's go down to 15th and Pennsylvania Avenue. Jeff Greenfield.
Well, President and Mrs. Clinton are smack in the middle of the street. He's without an overcoat, and he is looking very chipper. I guess this is what happens to Yale Law School graduates when they succeed in life. I'm standing here with a microphone, and he's the President of the United States. That's how it goes. But the crowd is, as you might expect, incredibly enthusiastic. The weather has turned even better than it was at the inaugural. It feels like spring, which, given the remarks in his inaugural address, maybe he has even more power than we thought as President of the United States. No overcoat, as you can see, no gloves. And he's just working one side of the street and the other. And I guess you could say he looks like a man who's, as the late Red Barber said, sitting in the catbird seat. It is as good-natured a crowd as you can imagine. They usually are on Inauguration Day. But a combination, I think, of the weather and, as you said, Peter, the fact that this is a staunchly Democratic town has got this crowd really, really in a terrific mood. I have not seen one negative sign. I'm sure there are some. I have not seen one incident. The police are being terrific. The Secret Service is being cooperative. It's just one of those days where perhaps 3 months from now, when he's locked in battle with the Congress, he'll look back and say, well, we got off to one heck of a start. Peter?
Thanks, Jeff. There haven't been many signs. We saw one a little while ago that said no new taxes, and when still Governor Clinton, or still President-elect Clinton, went to the interfaith service this morning, the anti-abortion forces were out in front of the African Methodist Church, and that is about all. And some people asked him not to mock God, but I think your characterization of the spirit of the day is absolutely precise. And just to pick up a little bit on what you said about the spring, when President Clinton began his inaugural remarks, he said that we celebrate the mystery of American renewal, and that's what so many people who've been in town over the last several days have felt. He said that the inaugural ceremony was held in the depths of winter, but by the words we speak and the faces we show the world, we force the spring. And that may be the reference that Jeff is making to presidential influence.
He's in front of the White House now.
They will go into the White House to freshen up for just a few minutes. Then they will come out to the reviewing stand in front of the White House, and this gigantic inauguration parade will begin in earnest before them. Yes,
I met yesterday Matt McLarty, who's the new chief of staff, who said that at 12:01 The Clinton people manned the telephones and moved into the offices, and by 2:30, so it's after that time now here, he himself, the chief of staff, will be there. And you were talking this morning, and it was really very moving, about this peaceful kind of transition. And here we have, just in the business of moving into the White House, in 1 minute, a whole new staff takes over. That's a difficult job.
Well, I don't want to make too much of it, but, you know, I spent a lot of my adult life in countries where there was no democracy, or where democracy was being plucked from somebody at the end of a gun. And despite what we've said about the onerous qualities of the Secret Service today, I think that those of us who've seen it in other countries and seen what people in other countries endure at the hands of their government are trebly impressed by what we see today.
You know, and I was just talking about a little bit of the, perhaps a little discord between the former First Ladies, but I must also say that the First Ladies are always gracious to each other. The presidents are gracious to each other. If there are hard feelings, you never know it on this day.
Jeff Greenfield, before we lose you all together to your World News Tonight assignment, we've been talking a little bit about this new generation. I was reminded that Mrs. Clinton said that the cruelest thing said about her during the campaign is when somebody in an article referred to her as middle-aged. What are the other symbols of new age you see? Have we lost Jeff Greenfield?
Seemingly so.
Okay. Jeff Greenfield, in fact, has already left his position. The president went by. Jeff said, that's it, I'm going home.
Well, you know, one of the new age, the most popular ball tonight,
MTV.
The MTV ball, even Nelson Mandela asked to be able to come to it, and if that's not...
All those guys behind the president are Secret Service agents whose job is very simple. If there's a bullet coming toward him, they step in front of it. I say simple.
Somebody said, Peter and David, that Hillary Clinton has become as interesting and exciting as Madonna and the Princess of Wales. That we haven't had a First Lady probably since Jacqueline Kennedy, who has aroused such, well, not controversy now, but in a way she's become a creature of such interest, much more than most First Ladies.
You think those two women could be put into the same room?
I'm only talking about in terms of interest and the amount of conversation. There's hardly a newspaper that hasn't, a magazine that hasn't devoted pages and pages to Hillary Clinton.
There's probably no one in the country at this point who does not know the influence she has on him. And I was thinking that there's his mother again and all of the other family members and friends and relatives who are going to be in the reviewing stand. President Clinton did say the other day that one of the things that would surprise us was not so much the remarks about Hillary, but if we heard the way his mother still really spoke to him.
She loves to bet, evidently, Peter. She loves the horse races. Very outspoken woman. You know, to some degree, might remind one of the way we used to talk about Miss Lillian. You know, she's her own person.
Well, there's no doubt that the new First Lady is her own person. It's been made clear by the president. He said that she's going to be at his side intellectually, that she knows more about many of the subjects with which he must deal than others, and in many cases more than him. I can't think that I've ever seen a public relationship such as this, which has appeared to be beset by its emotional or personal troubles, yet which seems so secure in terms of intellectual compatibility.
Not only that, she is the first lady to have her office, I hear, in the West Wing, in the same wing as the president, not in the East Wing. So she, even though she won't be on the same floor, she will be very close to him. And he still hasn't said, Diane Sawyer, in her interview last week, asked if she was going to sit in on cabinet meetings, and she said it depends on what my husband says, and he still hasn't said, so she may well be.
Sitting in the catbird seat, said Jeff Greenfield, and behind him to come, floats and bands and miniature horses and donkeys and enough
lawn chairs,
twirlers from every one of the 50 states to keep the president and the rest of us
imitators
amused for
There's an Elvis Presley float, if it's still going to be light enough for us to see it. You shake your head, David. You know how close President Clinton felt to Elvis Presley. He's a big fan.
Henry Graff, what do you think of all this? Our visitor from Columbia University.
Very exciting. As Barbara talked about the ages of these people, I was thinking that in the 18th century, the president who was inaugurated in 1793 was George Washington. That was his second inauguration. And he was 61 years old. In the 19th century, in 1893, Benjamin Harrison was inaugurated, and he was 60 years old. And here in 1993, we have a man who's 46 years old. We can say that history, at least with respect to the president's age, is on fast forward.
Well fought, Professor Graff.
People didn't live as long then as they do now.
That's true.
We have an 82-year-old Ronald Reagan, 80-year-old
Still pretty good.
Richard Nixon. He said what keeps him young is he doesn't look back. By the way, President Reagan was not invited, at least his office said, that he was not invited to this inauguration. President Ford's office said he was, but he just doesn't do this sort of thing.
Well, we certainly did see President Carter earlier today, and it was he who put very solidly at the center of the agenda the challenge of transition, because he said he couldn't remember a time except when Franklin Roosevelt inherited the presidency, or I guess gave up the presidency in the middle of World War II, World War II, Harry Truman, such a dark and challenging period for a new president.
Sun is very low already. 3:30.
There are 125 different parade units. Is this going to run into the ball tonight? They'll be parading into that MTV ball?
It's going to run into the dark.
One gets the sense watching the president here, yes, as he goes over to Mrs. Clinton there, that all along the parade route here, as he has been walking, he's seen people who he knows in some fashion or another, who he's met along the way. You've probably seen on the news or read in the newspapers in the last couple of days that he brought 50 people to the inauguration with him who represented what he called faces of hope, people who all the way through the campaign had in some way inspired him, with whom he'd made a connection. At the interfaith service earlier this morning, which was one of the more splendid occasions that we've seen in a long time, with wonderful music and great preaching, it was said that President Clinton knew practically everybody there. Have you ever known a politician, David, to know so many people?
Well, Clinton, between here and the Capitol, I don't know how many people are out there, 500,000 or whatever it is. He seemed to know somebody every few feet, because he waved to them and made little familiar gestures, and so did she. And of course, a lot of people from Arkansas would be in those bleachers because they were able to get the tickets. But still, he seemed to know a tremendous number of people.
Well, he's back into the car now for the last short drive to the White House, we suspect. And then it won't be long before he and Mrs. Clinton and Chelsea, I didn't see out of the car. Did I miss Chelsea?
She was in there.
She stayed in the car. Come to the inauguration reviewing stand. He's going to enjoy this parade. We'll be right
turn in and go in the White House back door.
From the nation's capital, ABC News' continuing coverage of Inauguration 93 will continue after this message and a word from our ABC stations.
I can see the hesitation in my customers' faces. I mean, I know I'm giving them the best prices, but how can I prove it? So I suggest they use their Citibank Visa.
Here you go, Walter.
If they see their purchase in a printed ad for less,
Enjoy your camera.
Citibank refunds the difference.
May I help
up to $150.
Yes, please.
That's Citibank price protection.
If getting the right price is important, this is the right card.
Not just Visa, Citibank Visa.
with steadfast stares. The people cry, brave future, new world. Time that goes by, the touch, the feel, the fabric of our lives. The touch, the feel of cotton, the fabric of our lives.
This is one of the easiest places for a Jeep Cherokee to go. But not because of its proven capability or its legendary Jeep ruggedness. What makes it so easy to bring the classic Jeep Cherokee here is the price.
Now save an additional $500 on new 93 Jeep Cherokees.
So, you're going on a trip. Please remember your parking space number. Oh, and your flight number, your gate number, your seat number, your confirmation number, your credit card number, your room number, the number in your party, and finally, your calling card number. Or just forget that last one and get a phone card from Sprint. Then all you've got to know is your home phone number and 4 digits. It's easy. And hey, if you can't remember your home phone number, you shouldn't leave home.
He stole their hearts, then their life savings. Now they want the love bandit to pay. That's when the mystery gets deeper. Plus,
we're going to show you something very few have seen. This little-known country has a custom so shocking they don't want you to know about it.
Do you think the hunt should be stopped?
The hunt should end. On 2020, Friday.
Katie Beers goes back to school, but how's she coping as she takes her first steps back to a normal childhood? Today at 5 on Eyewitness News, we're live with the first pictures. Plus, say it isn't so, Joe. Questions are being raised about that bullet in Botafuco's window. We'll tell you why. Also, mourners beware. Thieves who stake out cemeteries are robbing grieving families. We'll show you how they get away with it. And the torch is passed. Diana Williams live from Washington with inauguration highlights. Today at 5 and at 6 right here on Channel 7.
You lend big bucks to your little darlings and they never pay you back. How to make your kids grow up and pay up on the next Oprah. Today at 4 right here on Channel 7.
Finally, a credit card reward program for everybody. Earn rewards even if you don't charge a lot. From shopping to travel discounts. Or save for a free flight. Chase bonus dollars. Is your credit card this rewarding? Bonus dollars from Chase Manhattan. Profit from the experience.
Be a wheel watcher.
Tonight at 7:30, right here on Channel 7.
From ABC News, this is continuing coverage of the 52nd presidential inauguration. Once again, Barbara Walters, David Brinkley, and Peter Jennings.
Welcome back to our coverage of the inauguration. You're looking down at Pennsylvania Avenue. You write down the number, we'll make a call here. We just had a call, and we're going to make a confirmation call, Barbara, right?
well, I was told by Mrs. Reagan that she and her husband had not been invited to the inauguration. This was when President Reagan was given the Medal of Freedom last week by President Bush. But Mrs. Reagan, who is obviously watching us, called to say, her husband's office called to say, no, indeed, they had been invited. So perhaps Mrs. Reagan just didn't know at the time, but she's been calling us. We're going to try to get her on the line.
Peter Jennings. Is Mrs. Reagan there?
Are we beginning to sound like a call-in show?
They do very well call-in shows.
Yes,
I know.
they
Call out.
By the way,
Why don't we watch the parade for a second?
That was, by the way, the last, when President Bush gave President Reagan the Medal of Freedom. He was only the third president to receive it and the only living one, and it was quite a ceremony to see all
Reagan? Hi, it's Peter Jennings. How are you?
Do you want to fill us in?
Well, Barbara has just corrected it on the air. I was just going to take a second here and ask you what you think of the inauguration and the parade. Hang on just, Mrs. Reagan, hang on one second. Barbara, maybe perhaps you better speak to Mrs. Reagan.
Oh, dear.
I'm going to put Barbara on Mrs. Reagan. Okay.
Well, in case anybody wonders whether this is a live program, this is a live program.
Let's go back to the parade while Barbara's getting things straightened out, because you can't hear Mrs. Reagan anyway, and I don't want to give the to put her in the awkward position of putting her on the air without her knowledge. Here she is, Barbara. There's Warren Christopher, and the new National Security Advisor for President Clinton, who is Tony Lake. They are already in the reviewing stand. Warren Christopher is or has not been confirmed. We believe he has just about to be officially confirmed as the Secretary of State, a man who takes on an enormous boatload of problems, as we've talked a couple of times today. And Tony Lake, who has had experience here in Washington before as a policy maker, worked for Foreign Policy magazine for a while as someone who influences foreign policy, who went up to be an academic and a gentleman farmer, has come back to be President Clinton's national security advisor. And Ann Compton is over in the White House grounds. While we finish this conversation with Clinton, there's Richard Gephardt, Congressman Gephardt and his wife. Ann, what's happening over there? Ann Compton, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, what's cooking over there?
I can hear you speak up just a little.
Well, I can tell you what I think Ann is trying to do. She's trying to get Mac McClarty, who is the President's Chief of Staff, his boyhood friend, wired up so we can all have a conversation with him, which will not be unusual in that Mac McClarty is not a total recluse by any means. But one of the things we noticed about the Clinton presidency, or the Clinton campaign and then the Clinton presidency in the transition, is how the men around him are devoted to him and are private men. There is Bruce Babbitt from Arizona, who is designated so far to be the Secretary of the Interior. Ann Compton, are you ready?
I can hear you. Thank you.
Ann Compton, are you ready?
Mr. McClarty, have you had a chance yet to get into your Chief of Staff office, and is this transition now going to turn into a working administration? Can you hit the ground running?
We are in our office. We're at our desk, and we're working this afternoon, and we're looking forward to getting to work on the people's business and moving this country forward.
But is the actual business of government an economic plan too much to ask in how many days from now?
Well, I don't think there's any specific timeline. The President has certainly been very much focused on this economy. As you well know, the economic conference focused on all those issues. Constructive meetings have taken place with his advisors, and we're very much focused on that issue, as you know.
Did the former Chief of Staff leave you a note in the drawer? Do the phones work? Is this going to be smooth?
Very gracious and orderly transition. Susan and Jim Baker are very gracious people, and we had a nice visit this morning. We had visited several times by telephone, so that part went very smoothly, as you would expect.
Mr. McClarty, can you hear me?
Peter, how are you today?
How are you, sir? Nice to see you, and
well,
congratulations on this. What's the first thing you did in the White House today?
Well, the first thing, Peter, was to get at our desk, get our people in place, to get a sense of organization and teamwork in order to serve the President and serve the people of this country.
Any couple of anxious moments there? Did you know where everything was?
Oh, I think it's a natural human reaction when you're moving into a new office. There are a few things that are not quite in the same place that you're accustomed to, but hopefully we can quickly overcome that.
No.
The honor of this opportunity to serve encourages you to get in place very quickly.
What's the first substantial thing that has been done, either by you or anybody else on the staff? You sent messages out to other world leaders?
Well, of course, the President has taken a number of initiatives, as you know, and this is the day where I think he has set the tone so well in his inaugural speech, and I think it spoke, it was vintage Bill Clinton. It was from both his heart as well as his head, and I think set the right tone. Now we've got a lot of work to do to get the organization in place to support the President, and we're hard at work doing that.
President Bush said he wanted all of his people to be out of their offices in the White House by noon today. Did they all make it?
They did. Jim Baker was most gracious in the transition. We had a nice visit this morning, and that part went very smoothly, which we're grateful for.
Are there some holdovers? Dick Cheney staying till 4 o'clock this afternoon, and National Security Aide John Howe staying for a few weeks?
There's some of those types of things, Ann, in place that were thoughtfully done and discussed and have gone very smoothly.
Did Bill Clinton write that speech himself?
Bill Clinton, as you know, writes most of his speeches, or at least has most of the input into them, and he worked on it, and I think he was very pleased with it.
George Stephanopoulos says he's going to come back and take a nap this afternoon. I don't believe that, do you?
Well, George was not resting when I saw him in the White House.
He says that President Clinton is going to take a nap.
Well, the president-elect, now the president, I think, is enjoying this crowd, visiting with everyone, and we'll see if that plan stays in place. He's really, I think, feels a deep sense of commitment. This is a special day for him and his family. It's a special day for our country.
And tomorrow he'll greet the public in the White House?
That's as the plan stands. Well, I think that's the inclusion approach, the engaged presidency that Bill Clinton has talked about, and we're looking forward to tomorrow in that regard.
Average American?
That's right.
Annie, could I just ask one question?
Thank you, Ann. Nice to see you.
Ann, he can't hear me, but would you ask him whether they're concerned about Zoe Baird's nomination as Attorney General? Are they absolutely think it's a sure thing now or not?
Peter Jennings is asking if you are concerned about Zoe Baird's nomination to be Attorney General.
Well, I think Zoe Baird has shown a considerable amount of poise and grace in this confirmation hearing. The confirmation hearing has examined the full issues on all of the conferees, and I think her nomination will go forward, and she'll be a splendid Attorney General.
Mac McClarty, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ann Compton, for snagging the President's Chief of Staff for us. As we said, that is Zoe Baird, of course, and she admitted before the Senate Judiciary Committee yesterday that she and her husband had made a mistake in hiring undocumented, I think is the correct terminology, undocumented aliens to work for them. She said she was acting as a mother in getting help for her children. She's talking to Carol Braumer there, another of the President's senior appointees here. That reviewing stand in front of the White House is full of the new power group in town, or in the case of Colin Powell, the continuing power in town, because I think, David, he's got about another 19 months to go. I'm not sure he will go that long, but he is someone with whom Bill Clinton may actually wrestle on some questions of foreign policy.
When you would think Clinton, who may come to office with some kind of hostility, may not be a war, something going on in the Middle East, he will want advice from Powell, who's been through it all.
The reason
I would think so.
The reason I suggest that they may wrestle a bit is because Colin Powell has something of as a reputation as a very cautious man, someone who argued quite vigorously, I'm told, on fairly reliable grounds about much that went on before Operation Desert Storm, who was not at all keen to flex America's muscles particularly aggressively in other parts of the world unless it's a sure thing, which you can understand. But Bill Clinton has given some hints that he's looking to be a little more activist in some regards, not least of which in the former Yugoslavia. We'll be back in just a minute to continue this celebration of Governor Clinton's inauguration as the 42nd President of the United States.
From Washington, ABC News coverage of Inauguration 93 will continue in a moment.
At Eagle, we're well aware of what kind of cars the general public wants. And for 1993, we're happy to announce that once again, we didn't build them. Introducing the new Eagle Vision, the new Eagle Summit, and Eagle Talent. Cars specifically designed for performance enthusiasts, because appealing to the masses has never appealed to us. Eagle, not intended for the general public.
Hi, may I take your order? Hello? How can I help you? Hello? Hello? Hello?
This week history is being made. Not here, but in the kitchen. This week, Ore-Ida introduces fast fries. So crispy, so delicious, you won't believe they came from your oven and not from a fast food place. Fast fries. They're that good.
Hello?
When your sinus and nasal congestion feels this bad, what can you do? Last year, you wanted to call the doctor. Last year, you wanted a prescription. But this year, Tavis D in its full prescription strength is available without a prescription. Just one tablet helps relieve 12 hours worth of painful congestion and sneezing.
Guess what? I'll be there after all.
Tavis D. One tablet, 12 hours, and now no prescription.
Whoa! Next time, keep your weight on your left skate.
You
hockey player, mister?
No. Dave Lennox. I'm an inventor.
I'm gonna be a hockey player the best.
Well, you keep at it and stay warm.
You too, mister.
I'm working on it.
The best ideas in heating and cooling still come from the company that bears his name. One reason why, for nearly a century, must be a Lennox.
You've seen it before today. This is one of the most moving views of America from the Lee Mansion at Arlington Cemetery, across the cemetery, across Memorial Bridge there in the left-hand corner, the Lincoln Memorial, which was the point at which President-elect and Mrs. Clinton ended their journey from Monticello the other day, and then down along the mall to the front north steps of the White House. The President and Mrs. Clinton on their way out to the reviewing stand, so this parade can finally get underway, and there is Chelsea. And as they go, Barbara Walters, tell us what the former First Lady, Mrs. Reagan, had to say.
All right, well, first of all, she said that to her knowledge, she and President Reagan had not been invited to the inauguration, but my feeling is that probably the president did receive it in his office, and maybe it just was not communicated to Mrs. Reagan, but Mrs. Reagan is not at all hurt about that, because they would not have planned to come. They're very comfortable where they are. Now then, Mrs. Reagan said that she did indeed show Mrs. Bush around, including the laundry room and so on, and that she would like it to be known that she certainly was very gracious and accommodating to Mrs. Bush. However, it is also true that she never was, the Reagans were never invited to a state dinner at the White House in the 4 years that the Bushes were there. So now you have both sides, and I think we can rest our case on that.
Let's leave that where it lies.
That's why don't we? In the reviewing stand will be
walking out to it then.
Will be the family, brothers of Hillary, brother of Bill Clinton, the entire cabinet, and then what's described as close friends will be sitting in the back of the reviewing stand.
And, of course, he has now been in the White House, or the President's house, as president for the first time.
And the Gores and their 4 children.
They had lunch on Capitol Hill, so they've come back to the President's house, and he's not going to get into the reviewing stand until they're good and ready for him. So, Chelsea, if you wouldn't mind just standing outside the door.
Just wait outside, honey. We'll get to you.
How life changes in such a short period of time. And the parade gets underway with the Army Band playing ruffles and flourishes. Rolling along. The band that was organized right at the end of World War II in 1946, stationed at Fort Meade in Maryland.
Is called a bearskin. I looked it up the other day.
It is?
And the smaller version of it is called a busby. Now, this is the most useless piece of information you will hear today.
Well, of course, it's another of these links between the United States and Great Britain. You see
it's
the
British,
bearskin
right?
worn by all the household guards.
The British.
That's the United States Corps of Cadets, right in front of the President now, representing the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, representing the 4,000 men and women of the U.S. Military Academy, wearing their West Point gray uniforms, which date back to the early 1800s. This is why the Corps of Cadets is referred to as the long gray line.
By the way, outside of the military units, all of the people in the parade, they have come here at their own expenses. So many of them, with their own cities and towns, raise the money to send them here. Very proud of them all over the country.
Young people do that by selling donuts and washing cars and making a little money and kicking it into the kitty. And they pay their own way.
And there just beneath you, in the blue uniform, the Old Guard, United States Infantry Old Guard.
All members of the military will be represented in the different units today, the 5 different units of the parade.
I'll tell you right now that we and the official announcer of the parade are going to confuse one another, and probably you as a result. Because I cannot tell you right off the top whether this is the United States Infantry Old Guard. It is not, because they're in blue, but I think it's the Arkansas Army National Guard. And they're wearing pleasant. The Hope High School Super Band. The first civilians to pass the President. They played at his inaugurations in Little Rock, Arkansas. They played at his announcement rally. Boy, are they proud and happy people. Trudy McAdams, 17 years old, their lead drum major.
Maybe it's a flaw from my childhood, but I cannot listen to that march without thinking the monkey wrapped his tail around the flagpole, which is not the words.
This band is also supposed to be playing, and maybe they have earlier, the Arkansas Traveler. We're going to be hearing a lot of that, I think, in the next 4 years. And maybe I'm Just a Little Girl from Little Rock. Remember Carol Channing singing that, and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes? Well, it's going to be a big hit again, I think.
Well, I hope so.
Now, this is the Welcome Home America float, as you can see just as clearly as we can. It welcomes home all Americans to the new national spirit, which is the theme of the inauguration. Representing Tennessee, home of the Vice President, Smith County's high school band from the very agricultural region that Vice President Gore comes from and calls home, based in Carthage. And the Jesse White Tumbling team. Let me tell you what the inaugural parade said about them. Faster than the Chicago Bulls, more powerful than the Bears, and they can certainly leap over a tall building in a single bound. They come from Chicago's inner city. They perform for audiences around the world, the Jesse White Tumblers. Great source of pride for Chicago's, Cabrini Green homes, and also for the entire city of Chicago. Performing for President Clinton. What a thrill. We'll be back.